Well, good morning, everybody, and once again, can I extend a very warm welcome to you all to this, supposedly the final meeting before 2020. First of all, can everybody up the back hear me okay? Could you put your hand up just to... Fine. The next thing is, obviously, phones. If anybody's got a mobile phone, could you please check and make sure it's switched off? Thank you. The other important issue is that this is Wednesday. We always have on a Thursday, we have our fire alarm test. So if the fire alarm goes off, you'll know it's real. And could you please make your way to the exit over there where you're taken to a safe area. Before we go into the meeting, the business of the meeting, just two issues I would like to speak about. Obviously, we've been well aware of the serious problems with the gas supply in many of our areas. It's become a bit of a disaster and a logistical nightmare. So what we'll have is, I think it's going to be the Chief Executive that's going to give us an update on the issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Provost. In relation to the network gas outage, the Council first became aware of this when the first alert came in on Sunday morning, and the initial reports were that up to 8,000 households may be affected for a period of up to 7 days. Council services were alerted and put in standby, and a local resilience partnership, LRP, was set up with many different agencies represented, including the Council, Fire and Rescue, Police Scotland, the Scottish Ambulance Service, SGN, who were the responsible gas company, NHS Forth Valley, the Health and Social Care Partnership, Scottish Water and the voluntary sector. The strategy was to focus on preservation of life, property and the environment, and to lead in bringing this situation back to normal as soon as possible. It was clear that SGN would require to visit all properties affected in person, and the approach was to ensure that those who were most vulnerable should be dealt with first, including those who receive support from the Health and Social Care Partnership and NHS Forth Valley, using already established lists of those who are vulnerable, as well as the SGN identified priority customers. SGN established its base at Camelon. It was available at short notice and could accommodate the many vehicles that were coming in and out. The base was a distribution point for heaters and hot plates for those most in need. Delivery of these items to vulnerable residents took place with staff from many agencies, including Falkirk Council, and people worked through till 1 o'clock on Monday morning in order to distribute these. Communications with those affected started on Sunday afternoon with clear instructions on what residents should do and an explanation of the process. Information on school and education facilities closures was also updated early Sunday evening. Sharing across social media platforms was widespread from both the response agencies and the public. Information was updated throughout the day, including information to elected members, with a final update around about 11 p.m. Two major teleconferences were held at 4 p.m. and 10 p.m. to update partners on the actions being taken and planning ahead for the next stages. On Monday the 2nd, door-to-door leaflet drops started with volunteers and agency staff across the 8,000 households. Further public communication took place again with significant sharing via social media of accurate information from trusted sources. And sentiment was relatively positive, with communities appreciating the efforts being made to restore power by the large number of agencies who were visible in the affected areas. Members were also informed of the outcomes of the LRP meetings. Some local schools were able to assist with hot food for those who needed this most, and the Community Trust made showers available in their sports centres for free. 2 council-run support centres were opened in the communities where hot drinks were made available. The distribution of heaters and hot plates also continued, and Scottish Government was kept informed of the LRP actions throughout. Supplies started to be restored on Monday afternoon, making significant progress relative to the earlier projections of up to 7 days to resolve the situation. SGN brought in an additional 250 gas engineers to help, and work continued on this until late on Monday night, by which time 3,000 properties had been reconnected. On Tuesday, yesterday, Falkirk Council took over the running of the LRP from Police Scotland as we moved from the response to the recovery phase of the incident. Reconnection work continued as the distribution centre and support centres remained open. Numbers attending the support centres were low. As of lunchtime, around 5,000 households had been reconnected, and work continued on trying to establish contact with those properties where no access had been gained. Further sweeps were taking place in order to catch no-reply households, and this continued into the evening. As properties were reconnected, information on how to claim compensation was also distributed to households, and further partner communication updates were issued via partner websites and shared across social media. Members were informed of the latest position. As of last night, 460 properties remained unconnected, and the aim is that all of those should be dealt with today, if at all possible. Rona Geisler is currently chairing a further meeting of the LRP, and a further update to members will follow from that. In conclusion, communities face the potential for significant discomfort and worse. However, the swift actions of SGN and the LRP did mobilise hundreds of responders to assist on the ground. The high visibility of this gave community reassurance that everything was being done to help them. It is also important to stress that communities themselves came together very well to help each other get through a difficult time, and we should offer our thanks for that. It is also of note that communities received clear and regular information, and that was vital to help the situation, and offered an explanation of what was happening and what residents could do to ensure that they got their supplies back as soon as possible. As with all such events, we will be seeking to learn from what went well and what could have been done better. From a council perspective, personally, I would like to put on record my gratitude to all the council employees who worked so hard to support our communities, and particularly the vulnerable people in our communities. They have played an exceptional role. I'm also grateful to local elected members who've been very active in supporting and reassuring local communities. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you very much. Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, Provost. I would echo everything that the Chief Executive said there. This has been an unprecedented incident. It's one that couldn't have been predicted. However, I think what we have demonstrated is the statutory agencies, voluntary agencies and the community in Falkirk are very resilient, and in times of crisis come together and work very effectively together. I think that the statutory partners immediately just jumped into action along with supporting SGN, and indeed there's credit to Falkirk Council's additional contractors, gas contractors, who volunteered to assist with the mammoth task of visiting all the homes and assisting with the shut-off and switch-on process. Very quickly, I had discussions with the Scottish Government on Sunday about what support that they could give, and the resilience team was indeed deployed and spent the day out in Camlin on Monday looking at whatever assistance they can give, and there's still ongoing discussions, particularly around the arrangements of compensation and indeed the Scottish Welfare Fund, to ensure that those that are most vulnerable and on the lowest income are not disadvantaged as a result of the additional costs in relation to the temporary heating situation. I think our communities and indeed the customers, our residents, have behaved absolutely fantastically. They immediately understood that there was no fault to lay, and complied with all the instructions, and indeed did so in a very courteous way. So I think there's a lot of credit has to go to the understanding of our communities and the difficult times that we've been in. Also to the community who have again used our experience from the Beast from the East, immediately swung into action in the necessary areas and provided that additional support to ensure that particularly our elderly, vulnerable and the children were able to be accommodated, kept warm and able to get something hot to eat. Originally, it was anticipated that the work would take about a week. The fact that we are at Wednesday with less than 500 properties still to be visited, and I would anticipate that that should have been done by the close of business today, has been a phenomenal task, particularly for SGN, but I think it's shown that they'll be able to respond as quickly as possible. And who would have known that there was a stock of 9,000 heaters lying somewhere in a warehouse just ready to be utilised. But I think we've managed to see our way through this particularly difficult time, and I think that there's all credit to the staff involved, some who have gone above and beyond the duty, those that were off on leave immediately came back, and others worked antisocial hours in order to ensure their most vulnerable were supported. And indeed, our home care staff have to be credited with having to redirect from those that with lesser priority in this circumstance to be able to make sure that everybody was accommodated. So I would just like to add my thanks to everybody involved, the statutory, non-statutory, voluntary services, but also to our communities and indeed the customers of SGN in all of this and their understanding, and hope that everybody will be warm by the end of today. Thank you.
Councillor Bissett, thank you.
Thanks, Provost. I'd like to associate myself with the comments made by the Chief Executive and Leader of the Council as well. I think it was a time of crisis, and as usual in times of crisis, the people of Falkirk pulled together, as we saw in the Beast from the East. And so I would like to pay tribute to the emergency services, fire, ambulance and the police who were absolutely brilliant at getting out there and looking after the most vulnerable. And I think that also within the council, Paul Ferguson and his team, who made sure that crisis grants went to the most vulnerable, they ramped that up and made sure people who were having to use extra electricity made sure they got their crisis grants. Myself and the Provost and Councillor Grant and Councillor Blackwood popped up to the Chapel Hall, and they opened up the hall there, and they laid on sandwiches and soup and everything as they did across the area. And I think a big tribute to the community for doing what they always do and getting involved. And also there have been many people, many incidents of people who said, you know, my house, I've still got gas on, so somebody can come and get a heat in my house and get fed in my house. There have been many examples of that. So I'd just like to thank everyone for their contributions, and hopefully today we'll see everybody back on. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. I would like to echo the sentiments of other people and to thank the Chief Executive and our officers for having sort of worked through a very comprehensive resilience plan in order to help restore the gas and to ensure that the communities were able to remain at home and be properly fed and kept warm. And I think what really shines through this is that everybody came together. There was clearly a very strong plan, and the community spirit that came through demonstrates how fortunate we are to live in the community we do. And I would just like to thank everybody who contributed.
Okay, thank you very much. I would just like to echo the sentiments and to thank everybody that was involved in it. It was a logistical nightmare, and if anybody, I know that there's been a number that's visited the hub in Camlin, and they would have seen the wonderful work that was doing for that area that was spreading out all over the communities. Okay then, thank you.
Thank you, Provost. I can just concur with the former speakers and the help that have been done for the gas outage. I hope the same help goes to Falkirk's Forgotten Villages regarding heating systems that they've got, where they are campaign at the moment, where it's been in the news. It was in this morning, Good Morning Britain this morning. I hope they didn't waste the heaters that Cecil talked about, because the people up the Braes will need them for the inadequate heating system that they have. And I just hope that the officers give as much attention to these villages as they have to the gas outage. Provost.
I thank Provost. I'd like to concur with Councillor Kerr. I've been over 3 weeks with the last 4 with a chest infection, and I turned my heating down to 16 because last winter I was paying £1,900 a quarter, right? And I sat with a blanket on and a tammy on, right? If somebody comes to my door, I sometimes still got the tammy on, you know what I mean? That's who bad things is. There are people paying £150 a week. Right, there was 100 people last night at Whitecross. There have been meetings at Avon Bridge, there have been several meetings at Slamanan. All the public have spoken, they've got petitions, they've been on the radio, they've been on the press, and I'm delighted to hear what we've done for the people of Falkirk. But as I say, I just want the same support for the people, the public. There's no politics or that involved. It was actually good to see a candidate, wasn't it? You know, somebody I spoke about last night at the meeting. But what I'm saying is, the people have spoken. All folk paying £150 and say their house is still no warm, choosing between food poverty and fuel.
Right. Okay. Councillor McCluckie, thank you very much, and I'm sure that members were listening, but we're discussing the issue, the gas problem.
Yeah, but just for the record, as this is in public, to say that officers are engaging with the communities and indeed the energy suppliers as well as Scottish Government around the issues that's been discussed in the various community meetings. So I would just leave it at that.
Provost, I would just like to put on record.
I've got a young, Councillor Murtagh, I think, had a light on first, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. And I would say that other local members are also engaging in that issue and have been engaging in that issue on behalf of their constituents for some time, and that it wouldn't make a lot of difference given that the situation is electric to give them more fan heaters. But I think over and above that, we're all working hard to try to come to a solution for that. I would like just to say, from a public protection point of view as portfolio holders for the resilience team, I know that obviously everybody can see the incredible work that the SGN engineers and those volunteers and the public have been doing, because they're very visible on the ground, but the people who are behind the scenes and who have been developing these plans in meetings. I spent a lot of time with them since the Beast from the East in terms of the lessons I've learned, and I know that there will be a similar process now, but I would like to put on record thanks to them and the way that they swung their plans into action and how smoothly that's enabled other things to go, and all the response team. I would like to add as well that although there were some, then we know that there's some still to be reconnected, and there have been issues where people have here or there said, oh, I haven't been able to get a card or my gas. The staff in the back rooms of SGN as well, even up after midnight last night on the phone, there were engineers still going out after midnight, reconnecting, responding to inquiries, and still through the night able to get those. So they deserve credit as well, although they're not visible. So thank you to everybody who worked in that response, in particular our communities also.
Thanks for your input. Councillor Hughes.
Yes, thank you, Provost. I just wanted to put on record that in terms of the wet electric heating systems, last night, that was last Tuesday, I attended a public meeting in Slamanan Bowling Club where 70 members of the public attended, and I actually wrote down all the issues and concerns that people had and have passed that on to the relevant sections. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you. Okay then, we're going to move on. Obviously, it's a very emotive issue, but we were specifically discussing the wonderful work in getting an update with the Chief Executive into the gas, and I can appreciate members who have got serious issues and ongoing in their communities, and hopefully they'll all be addressed. The next issue before we go right into the agenda is actually good news. Falkirk Council once again has been very successful with winning a few major awards. I think we're going to ask Mr. Robin Millard to come forward, sir. If you could like to come to the end there and then just tell everybody how we've been successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. Councillors, good morning. Given the news that you've just heard, it's perhaps nice to give you some good news, success on the part of the Council and its community partners at the Scottish National Planning Awards. We had 3 projects shortlisted for the Planning Awards, and on the night had very good success on the evening. The Cairn Dams project, I'll ask some of my colleagues here to stand if they have the award, was successful. I wanted to particularly start with that award because it was voted the People's Choice Award on the night, and really the success of that project, which is really a collaboration between council partners, Larbert High School, Central Scotland Green Network Trust, Scottish Wildlife Trust and the local Nature Resource Management Group, shows what happens when communities come together and they can promote and consequently vote for a project in the numbers they did, which really gave the project the profile it received at the National Planning Awards. So well done to the team and the other community partners involved in that. Falkirk Townscape Heritage Initiative, which is a programme that's been running for the last few years. Folks, if you want to stand up, a couple of the members of the team here have taken that forward. A significant programme of investment in the town centre, Falkirk Town Centre historic environment, improved some 80 properties, 15 shop fronts, 6,000 or so square metres of public realm, well supported by Historic Environment Scotland and the Heritage Lottery Fund. That was good enough to win the Place Award on the evening. The Inner Forth Landscape Initiative won a partnership award. This again a significant partnership project, largely led by the RSPB, and our thanks for that, but involved a number of significant partners: Scottish Natural Heritage, Historic Environment Scotland, Central Scotland Green Network Trust, amongst others, along with the other local authorities that bound the Upper Forth area. That was a huge project ranging from 50 or so different elements, large to small, that really lead to an improvement in the context and the management of the areas around the Upper Forth. As I say, that received the Partnership Award, so well done for a good project. However, for me, the icing on the cake was that the final award of the evening at the Scottish Planning Awards is the overall award for quality in planning. And I've got this here because that again was granted to the Cairn Dams project, so well done to the team for that. That's really is a huge accolade for the team involved there, because this was up against significant competition from across Scotland and some far bigger, more ambitious projects, but it just shows you the power of partnership working, community engagement. The planning awards are all about quality, about how the learning from that planning decisions, experience and movement by the community can lead to change across Scotland. So to receive this is a fabulous accolade to that team in the award, so well done again. And that's it. Thank you.
And congratulations to all the team, that maybe some that aren't here. Is a credit to this council. Councillor Meikle-John.
Provost, thank you. Just a few short words. I had the privilege of attending the awards with the staff, and I just want to take this opportunity to thank them for all the hard work. From Falkirk Council's perspective, they have shown leadership. They have worked very closely with a range of partners. These particular projects have been co-produced, and it just shows with that collaboration what we can actually deliver. And it's created a health and well-being for all our communities that are involved. If you look at each of the projects, there's something very positive in all of that. And there's a legacy. There's a legacy that will last for some time, and one that the community can actually take a lot of credit for. helping deliver and maintain. So I just want to put on record my thanks to the staff and the collaboration with the partners, their contribution to this. But again, it just shows what the power of community can actually do in helping deliver all of those projects, and indeed what it will be sustained in the future.
Mr. Moody.
Yes, thank you, Provost. Provost Buchanan.
Present.
Apologies have been submitted by the Deputy Provost. Councillor Aitchison. Apologies have been submitted by Councillor Alexander. Councillor Binney. Yes. Councillor Bissett. Councillor Black. Councillor Blackwood. Councillor Bowes. Councillor Coleman. Councillor Colley. Councillor Coombs. Councillor Flynn. Councillor Garner. Councillor Goldie. Councillor Grant. Councillor Harris. Councillor Hughes. Councillor Kerr. Apologies have been submitted by Councillor McHugh. Councillor McCluckie. Councillor Meikle-John. Councillor Munro. Councillor Murtagh. Councillor Nicholl. Councillor Nimmo. Councillor Patrick. Councillor Reid. And Councillor Spears.
Okay, then. Declaration of interest, and just for clarity, I'll read this out. Members should declare any financial and non-financial interest they have in any item of business at the meeting, identifying the relevant agenda item and the nature of the interest. At this stage, have we got any declarations? Don't think there's anybody. Okay, thank you for that. Item 3, just to inform you at this time that item 13, which was the 2 notices of motions, both have been referred to the Executive, so you can score that off for your agenda for today. That takes us on to item 3, and it's item 3A, minute of special meeting of Falkirk Council held on the 20th of September 2019, pages 5 to 9 on your agenda papers. Have we any questions arising from that minute, or can we agree that minute? Agreed the minute? Thank you, everybody. Takes us on to item 3B, minute of meeting of Falkirk Council held on the 25th of September 2019, pages 10 to 25 on your agenda. Any questions arising from that minute, or can we agree that minute? Agreed. Thank you. That takes us to item 3C, minute of special meeting of Falkirk Council held on the 12th of November 2019, pages 26 to 29 on your agenda papers. Any questions arising from that, or can we agree that minute as well? Agreed. That takes us to item 3D, volume of minutes, volume 2, 2019-20. Any questions arising? Fine, thank you. And if you could tell us, just for everybody's sake, if you can tell us the page so everybody can refer to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. The item concerned was page 237, the strategic property review. I believe an amendment has been issued to
we'll
clarify.
Fine. We'll get Mr. Moody just to clarify that point. So it's item 237 on the volume 2, the minute. Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Provost. Councillor Munro is correctly referring to item EX 72, which is the draft minute in relation to the strategic property review that was considered at the executive meeting on the 29th of October. And Provost, Councillor Munro also correctly points out that an amended minute was issued yesterday for consideration by the executive at its meeting next week. And as reflected in the volume of minutes, didn't properly reflect the decision taken at the meeting itself, where the leader from the chair had moved an amended version of the recommendations, which removed the first aspect of it, the approval of the draft property strategy and implementation plan, and instead had adapted number 2 in the recommendations to say that the discussions would be issued for consideration by the executive. I do apologise, Provost, to Council for the mistake that has slipped into the system here, but the appropriate action has been taken to ensure that the amended minutes available for the executive next week.
Okay, happy with that?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
Of the agreement, presumably it was unanimous. The agreement of the volume of minutes. It was unanimous that the vote that's just taking place. Everybody agreed to the volume of minutes, including Councillor Garner.
Okay, so what happened was Councillor Monroe brought a question up. It was answered by Mr Moody. Then I've stated, as everybody agreed then to the volume minutes, any other questions, and I just got a general agreement. Is that correct?
Okay. That being the case, why did Councillor Garner publish a fictitious account of that meeting in Facebook, which caused my home to be cyber-attacked?
All right, well, I don't think we can...
Oh yes, I think he could. I think Councillor Garner is subject to the code of conduct as everybody else and fell far short.
Hold on a second.
What is he looking for here? Is he looking for an apology?
Hold on a second. First of all, if we just hold this, just to clarify the legality in relation to this, what you're saying then, Councillor Reid, is that there was what you said was a fictitious report on...
It purported to say that the motion put forward that the executive was to spend £900,000 on street signs. No, in fact, no mention at the meeting.
Okay, right. Well, I'll just clarify this point because obviously this is the first I've heard of this with Mr. Moody. Do is we'll get Mr. Moody for some legal clarification on that matter. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Provost. As I understand matters as set out by you, the volume of minutes is in front of the Council today. The Council is asked to note the volume of minutes. A relevant question was raised and answered by Councillor Monroe, and the Council agreed to note the volume of minutes, and I think that concludes the business in relation to the minutes today. Councillor Reid, as I understand it, is raising an issue which is separate from that, albeit related to the content of the volume of minutes, and it's not an issue that is before the Council today on its agenda, and I think accordingly not for further discussion.
Okay, then that takes us to item 3, Information Bulletin, Volume 2, 2018 and 19. You've all been getting a copy. Have any questions arising from that? And if there is, could you maybe give us the page? Thank you. Councillor Patrick.
Thank you, Provost. Just a question on Appendix 1, page 6, where it talks about an expenditure of £14,655 for monitoring and management of ponds in the Falkirk Council sites. Can the Director please give me a report on the work undertaken by as the monitoring process, and particularly whether in fact the Lionthorn Pond is being managed and maintained under this item?
Thanks for your query, Councillor. I don't have that information to hand at the moment, but I can get back to you on that. Yeah.
I'll get it. Well, I will get an answer.
Is it Councillor Kerr?
Thank you, Provost. Just on page 6, on the item regarding Trinity Church Archway, can I get some information on that?
Yes, this is reinstatement of decorative stonework around an archway required. Sorry, this was reinstatement of decorative stonework around a church archway required the needs of a specialist stonemason
Okay.
to undertake that.
And why are we paying for it?
It sits within a public realm area.
All right. Okay. Okay. And my second question is, I'd just like to know where the vehicle and plant wash has got to be located.
That's at Dalgrain Depot.
Right. Okay.
Item 5, it's the role and action log, pages 30 to 33 in your agenda. Mr Moody.
Yes, thank you, Provost. As far as I can see where the items are required for this meeting, they are on the agenda.
Feedback on community and stakeholder consultation. The Chief Executive will present the report and it's pages 34 to 68 on your agenda. Thank you, Chief Executive.
Thank you, Provost. This report sets out the results of the consultation exercise conducted following the report to Council on the 26th of June this year in relation to the joint working between the Council and the Community Trust. And it identifies next steps in taking this work forward in the wider context of the strategic property review. The background is set out at section 3. It reminds the Council that the Council agreed an interim work plan for the Council and the Community Trust. This has been taken forward by a joint working group consisting of 4 elected members as listed, representatives from the Trust and officers, and that group is chaired by myself. And the key task assigned to that group was, of course, the development of a savings and investment plan over the next 5 years. In June, when the Council met, we considered a report providing an update on that activity with recommendations that aim to provide a framework for the joint working group to develop that 5-year plan to complement the Council's 5-year business plan and the strategic property review. And in response to that report, the decision of the Council was to delay any further implementation of these proposals until there had been a programme of engagement and consultation with communities, stakeholders and national bodies. In September, the Council received a report setting out the proposals, the details of that consultation and the timescales for reporting back. That included the intention to report back on the outcomes of the consultation to this meeting of the Council. In addition, since then, at its meeting in October, the Executive considered a report on the strategic property review and agreed to have a workshop for elected members that would review the SPR implementation plans and potential asset investment and rationalisation programme alongside the outcomes of this consultation, which we're reporting back on today. So turning to the consultation itself, at section 4 of the report, it ran from the 16th of September to the 31st of October and aimed to test the implications of putting the SPR principles into effect. And there were 3 elements of the consultation: an online survey, a series of focus groups and stakeholder consultation, which was organised by the Community Trust. In terms of the online consultation, which was the major element of the work taken forward, members will note at paragraph 4.5 that 1,743 responses were received to the survey. The results are set out in bullet points at paragraph 4.5 and at 4.6. I endeavour just to draw the main conclusions from that. I think the most notable outcome really is that a majority of those completing the survey did not wish to travel further to access improved facilities and services. So really the conclusion being that proximity was of greater importance than the quality of the facility itself. And I'm sure there's lots of detail and different views that might lie underneath that, but I think that was a not insignificant finding. In addition, there were positive outcomes, so that is where more people agreed or strongly agreed than disagreed or strongly disagreed. Positive outcomes in relation to statements about sharing buildings and resources, using schools as the main venues and closing buildings that are poorly used, in poor condition or too expensive. There was a strong view that investment should be in buildings that can be used for the biggest variety of activities. Briefly, in relation to the focus group sessions took place in 3 areas as set out at 4.7. Total of 28 people involved, so that's quite a low number. A number of findings set out in the report. Participants felt that school campuses have facilities that should be much better utilised, and that was something which had come forward, of course, in the June report, but some concerns were expressed regarding access to such buildings, particularly outside school hours. A strong feeling that buildings are currently well used should be retained, and a strong view that buildings should not be disposed of if there is not an appropriate alternative in place. Groups also stated it is essential for community organisations to be properly consulted regarding the use of buildings, and of course, as set out in the June report and indeed in this report, there is an important piece of consultation following the SPR workshops where we engage more fully with communities about what the implications of any SPR decisions might be and how that is taken forward. In addition, there were some concerns expressed at the focus groups in relation to community asset transfer. In terms of the stakeholder consultation, Trust officers arranged an engagement event with local clubs, groups and organisations who contributed to the development and delivery of culture and sport in the area. 39 individuals from 27 organisations attended the event, and there were, I think, quite mixed views in relation to both the consolidation and the geographic spread of facilities, albeit there was a consensus that investment is needed in sports facilities, especially if the overall number of facilities were to be reduced. In respect of the secondary school estate, there was support for improvement of these assets, but similarly some concerns about deliverability, suitability, cost and access. There was concern about the challenge and complexity around about asset transfer, and that had also been reflected in the focus group discussions to a degree. At a national level, the relevant national agencies such as Sports Scotland, Visit Scotland, Museums and Galleries Scotland and Creative Scotland were contacted for views, and the findings from that are set out briefly at paragraph 4.18. In terms of next steps, the Council has given a commitment to work together with the Trust to prepare a 5-year investment and savings plan, as I said, and that work remains ongoing. In the interim, the Council agreed to postpone its requirement of the Trust to submit its business plan from the 15th of November until the 6th of January 2020, and that will be a 1-year business plan. Beyond that, there remains, I think, an urgent imperative for the Joint Working Group to be in a position to make recommendations that will form the basis of the longer-term plan. And the next step is to hold the SPR workshop for elected members as agreed at the October executive. Following this workshop, the Council will then engage further with specific communities to work through how the way services are delivered in their area will impact and how that can be managed, taken forward. So that important piece of community consultation yet to be taken forward. The recommendations in today's report are set out at paragraph 2, and they are simply at this stage to note the outcomes of the recent consultation exercise and to note that these will be considered as part of the strategic property review. Thank you, Provost. Thank you, sir.
Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, Provost. Thank the Chief Executive for this update report, and that is indeed what it is. It's an update report, and because we are in a process. We always knew that the consultation on this was going to be limited, as there was limited information which we were able to consult on. And we could spend all day debating the consultation today, but that isn't going to change the information in front of us, and it's not going to change the fact that we didn't have any detailed proposals that to be able to take out to our communities to have a more meaningful consultation. So I hope that will be recognised by members today. The impact of where we are, as the Chief Executive has said, is that Falkirk Community Trust 5-year plan, business plan has been delayed, and that 5-year has been pushed back, with only a 1-year proposal being able to be brought forward, which again will be limited and will indeed have an impact because of the work that's not been able to be progressed and in order to inform that. Therefore, there is a clear need to progress with the strategic property review, and I understand that there is a date in the diary already for the workshops in early January in order to take that forward. This will obviously inform both the Falkirk Community Trust business plan, but also the Council's medium-term financial plan going forward. I think we all recognise that there's need for investment, and in particularly our sports and leisure facilities, and that there are buildings that are at end of life, and we could indeed provide some better and enhanced quality buildings that will meet the needs of a community. However, in order to do that, we need to be able to go to the communities and have those discussions, and for them to tell us as a council what buildings are most important to them. But we need to be able to have the information and the direction and be able to do that, and that's where we are at this time. I know that there's a desire within both development services and the Community Trust to move that forward. So I would hope that people will accept this as an update report and allow us to very quickly move to the next stage and getting something together from the views of the elected members to be able to take out to our communities early next year to have more meaningful conversations and be able to inform our budget planning process going forward, and indeed our investment plans within our communities as well.
Thank you, Provost. I think it's very positive that we have this report and we have a view of the community's feelings on the matter. And there are some surprises in it, as Chief Executive said, in that people don't want to travel long distances to large hubs of sport or whatever. And very often when you think of people with small children, mums and toddlers home in the day, or elderly people, of course it's fairly natural to recognise that they want facilities closer to home. And I think that this message comes through very clearly in here. The other message that comes through very clearly is the fact that the things people value. They value parks most of all, 63%, swimming pools, 47%, libraries, 46%. And I think it would be positive if our leisure services would reflect that balance in what they do going forward, because these certainly inform some of the priorities of our communities. And I feel with the demise of flower beds and things, we're losing some of the benefits of our parks and our leisure places. I feel it's very positive that we are going to have this workshop for all the members, and we'll be able to then go back to our communities and they will be part of this decision. So all in all, I think it's a very good report. Thank you.
Just to say I'd like to second and reserve the right to come back.
There's actually no motion. We're only here to note, so there's no formal motion.
Okay, thank you. I'll come back. Regarding the update report and the consultation exercise, this has been taken forward by, I'll say, a joint working group, which is usually a fairly amicable working group where we recognise that we need to move this forward, and the investment plan for the next 5 years is vitally important. Going for a year business plan puts real strain on our community trust, and it also sends out a message that the directive needs to be seriously looked at, and we need to seriously, through the workshops, consider the 5-year plan. The report back on the outcome of the consultation taken on between the 16th of September and the 31st of October, 1,473 responses. Personally, I would have liked to have seen more responses. You know, It's a big thing in the district, and we would like to obviously extend this debate, and we're going to do that in the council. But the main consultation covered the regard that people obviously want things in their own community. The proximity is of prime importance, and I think the working group are fairly united on that, and will work at trying to improve with the community trust the various places that we have. Now, people have realised that a lot of buildings are coming to the end of their life, and the cost they try to keep a lot of these buildings is really prohibitive. And I'm pleased to say that they agree with us on shared buildings, schools, etc. But we also need to invest in a lot of our other buildings, especially, and as recognised by the public, the buildings that are used. But the message must be clear. Use it to retain it. Heating and maintaining buildings that aren't used makes no sense to anybody, and I'm glad that the consultation picked up on that, and the people tend to agree. A stakeholders event, there seemed to be a consensus that investment was needed. And this is also recognised by the working group. That's why we need to move on, and we need to invest in our buildings, especially the ones that are of primary use, and we do no favours to our community if we don't do this. So I would say to the working group, I wouldn't say to them, I think they know this, that it's of prime importance, and it's a #1 priority that we need to look at. The Trust, trying to produce a business plan, they also need to produce a budget. Money's tight, we've been under austerity for the present government for some time, and it's now that critical time where we need to make strong decisions. We're here as a body to make these decisions, so we need to not play politics with this, not play with emotions. We need to look seriously at the buildings we have, the buildings we use, and how we move this forward for the benefit of the communities that we represent. That's called service delivery and management. So there is a clear need to progress with this property review. Thank you.
Okay then, as I've stated, we've noted the report. Does somebody else want to come in?
Just very quickly.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Provost. I accept that this is an update, and I'm not going to labour the points that I've already made regarding this consultation, but I just want it recorded that I think I've been vindicated in my criticisms of this consultation. I said it at the very start, and I continue to say it, and I've been honest at all the joint groups that we've been in, and with the Trust Board in my position there, that I don't think that consultation was fit for purpose, as the criticisms within it and the results show. However, I do think that, as I said at the last Council and Trust Joint Board, that I think that the strategic property review does need to take place to allow those of us on the Trust Board to make a realistic business plan, given that the board is still being asked to cut 50%, well, sorry, the council is cutting 50% of the board's funding. As I say, I don't think it's realistic to ask them to look at this and make these savings without the council first making its decision about what buildings would be or should be closed. I think it's putting the cart before the horse. I'm, however, slightly surprised to hear Councillor Spear say that he would have liked to have seen more responses, given that he voted against holding the consultation in the first place. Thanks, Provost.
Are we going to agree the report then? Have we agreed the report? Agreed. Thank you very much. Now to item 7 on your agenda this morning, Payments Advice Support Hubs. It's pages 69 to 73. And speaking to the report will be Mr Ritchie. Would you like to come? That's fine, Mr Ritchie there. Perfect.
Okay, thank you, Provost. Good morning, members. This report comes to Council this morning following the motion to the last meeting of the ordinary meeting of the Council. The terms of the motion are as set out in section 3.1 of my report. The report starts off by setting out for members what the current arrangements are, whereby customers can make face-to-face payments. That can be done at our hubs through Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m, excluding that lunchtime hour. Payments can also be made in one of over 130 PayPoint outlets and post offices across the council area. We note that some of these open as early as 6 a.m. and close as late as 11 p.m, and these facilities are available all week. We talk in the report about the increasing move of customers away from face-to-face payments towards more personally convenient methods of payment. We also note the move away from face-to-face payments at our own facilities and towards greater use of the 130 PayPoint outlets and post offices. We estimate that most of our customers have a more convenient payment solution than paying at our offices, and we're working with our customers to make sure that they are aware of these options. Turning back to our own hubs, we set out in the report how employees operate within our hubs. We have no dedicated cashiers. Staff offer frontline advice, support and make referrals to specialist officers. So taking payments is where we are not providing additional added value services to our customers. We know from surveys that there are around 90 customers who make payments at each of our hubs on a daily basis. We know that having come to make a payment, of these 90 customers, 2 are referred for other service support within the hubs. And we also know that on average 1 customer per day per hub who originally comes in to access a service other than a payment is then referred to the payment provision. In terms of staffing a payment service across the full day from existing resources, our view is that this would reduce the added value services that we currently provide to our customers. We know from the jump research undertaken prior to the move to the opening of the hub model that we only get 1 chance to identify support requirements and tailor individual support needs for our customers. So this first point of contact needs to be as good as it can be. So this means that we're looking at the need for additional resources to be put into the employee pool at each of our 3 hubs. The estimation of time required is not an exact science, but is based on the experience the manager has in running the hubs and the one-stop shops over a number of years. We're also conscious of trying to avoid a similar scenario to what happened with the Scottish Welfare Fund service earlier in the summer. So we have worked on the worst-case scenario of the maximum number of hours that are required. Our estimate of hours is based on the time to physically take payments, time taken to sign and check floats, undertake banking arrangements and banking controls at the end of the day, for existing employees to adjust their working patterns to cover for leave and absences, for training provision, and as I mentioned earlier, for resilience to cover issues such as what happened with the Scottish Welfare Fund. This model is designed to protect the core hours the teams provide that added value service to our customers. If we are able to implement the new arrangements on less time, then we will do so. If it takes the hours that we estimate, we have a buffer that we can use, that we can add to these added value hours that I've spoken about. Provost, the recommendations are set out in section 2 of the report. I'm happy to answer any questions that members have, along with my colleagues Brian Smale and Paul Ferguson. Thank you.
Okay, before I bring him in, I'd just like to ask you a question myself, because maybe I didn't fully understand what you had been saying in certain areas. And in terms of the motion that was agreed on the 25th, it stated quite clearly And item, just if you get the paper, item 3 will ensure that all 3 hubs are open at lunchtime and that members of the public are able to pay their bills at a time convenient to them, and in particular during lunchtime. And they ask that the Director of Corporate and Housing Services report back to the next meeting to confirm that this has been done. Well, can you confirm and clarify that this has been done?
Provost, this hasn't been done pending the identification of additional resources that members will consider at this meeting.
Thank you, Provost. I think there has been some good information and consideration given to the request around the opening of the hubs over that 12:30 to 1:30 period. However, there is a significant cost associated with that, and that has to be balanced with the quality of service, etc., that could be made available. The statistics clearly show that over time, the amount of cash payments that the advice hubs or the previous one-stop shops were taking has significantly reduced, and the lowest time for anyone wishing to access that particular service is at the lunchtime period, with something like just over 3,000 people last year over the whole year accessing at that time. Since then, there has been a plethora of other opportunities made available to people, and where they can pay through PayPoint, and particularly the post office. And Mr Ritchie's indicated quite clearly that this is a very flexible arrangement that enables somebody to either look at paying their bills at 6 o'clock in the morning, right the way through to 11 o'clock at night, either online or at an alternative place. And often we find that people are doing more than one thing when they go along to the post office anyway. Therefore, I do believe that having the multi-skilled advisors being able to be redirected at that time to support other staff in dealing with particularly complex cases is an enhancement to the service, and will be impacted if we have to look at our budget considerations. I think it's the wrong time to look at additional resources into this area when we have a programme here. Therefore, I do have an amendment which officers do have. I would suggest that Council agrees to maintain the current opening times of all the advice hubs, and as part of the improvement programme, we'll seek to carry out regular reviews of our frontline services to ensure our customer needs are indeed being met, and that this could be reported through the Scrutiny Committee. Also to seek to actively promote other ways that the public and customers can access our services where these are more convenient to them, because I believe that with different working hours, then our customers do want to access our services at different times of the day, and it may not be necessarily through direct face-to-face. But that if someone does need help and advice, they are able to get that by going into the advice hubs, and that advice and support is still available at the lunchtime period between 12:30 and 1:30. It's a cash payment service that isn't available, and if we look at the period of time that the East and West Hub haven't had that service, which is getting into certainly a year or more, particularly in the East, and it's worked very effectively. I see that that's no different to the rest of the council area. I would therefore propose the amendment as I've put forward. Okay.
Could I ask the question? Do standing orders required to be suspended? Do standing orders require to be suspended?
Yes.
No. Provost, no, not in my view. There's a recommendation in Mr Ritchie's report which is before you. The Leader of the Council is moving a motion in relation to that recommendation. I think probably the fundamental point which underlies the question, which Councillor Reid is making, is what's the effect of the decision made in the September meeting, and my understanding of that is that it's properly to be read fully in the whole of the motion as having the following effect, that if it was possible to rearrange the staffing arrangements so as to open the hubs at lunchtime to take cash payments without cost, then that would have been done. And it would then be reported back to Council that that had been achieved. But the last part of the motion, I think, preserves decision-making for the Council today where there was a cost identified. And as you've heard from Mr Ritchie's report, a cost has been identified. So there's therefore a question for the Council to answer this morning, which is, does it wish to spend the money on opening the hubs to receive cash during lunchtime hours? And that being so, the motion by the Leader of the Council is accordingly, in my view, competent.
Okay, thank you, Provost.
Okay, we're going to have a 10-minute recess for everybody. Thank you very much. Okay, members, thank you for that opportunity just to scrutinise the notice of motion. I'm going to come back. The notice of motion has been moved by Councillor Meikle-John. Have you got a seconder for that? You're going to second that, and you'll have an opportunity to come into the debate. Okay, right. Come back in. Fine. We'll go to Councillor Bissett now.
Thanks, Provost. We had a robust discussion around that, and we've got an amendment to bring forward. Basically, it looks actually at looking at the working hours, the existing working hours. So I'll just read out our amendment. We'll hand it around, but I'll read it out. So I'm moving that Council agrees to extend payment hours at advice and support hubs to include the period 12:30 to 1:30 by adjusting working hours accordingly within existing budgets in conjunction at the same time with the scrutiny process.
I'm happy saying that, Provost, aye, and I'll come back in.
Provost, can I say that we would be happy to support if officers can give confirmation that they can successfully manage to do that within the existing regime. However, I would ask, well, I understand that Councillor Bissett said the report, happy to have the report to scrutiny with regard to regular reviews. I assume you're happy to keep that there's regular reviews carried out, maintain our customers' needs, and just wondered if you were happy to also accept to seek to actively promote the other ways around payments that can be made and accessing our services. Yes, so that our customers are aware of all the ways they can access the council services.
Thanks, Provost. Yes, we can shuffle the hours and provide that service between 12:30 and 1:30. And if we shuffle the hours, we can still do that within existing resources.
Provost, can I get back in for a statement? A statement I ken has been agreed, but what I'd like to say, I'm sorry that it took so long to get an agreement. I raised this at a council meeting prior to putting a amendment in, a motion in, and I'd asked officers. I got answered with housing, and later came to pass it wasn't a housing issue, it was a finance issue, so I didn't get any information. I then went to put a motion up to council and asked the Chief Governance Officer to contact officers to try to see if there was a way forward on this. And if we'd found a way forward, if some response had come, I wouldn't have need to put the motion in. We then find ourselves only yesterday getting the information that folk come in the morning now and there's these costs and all different things late in the day. And I just wish that that sort of information was coming prior instead of taking so much time at a council meeting.
Thanks for your input, sir. So we're agreed that.
Yes, thank you very much, Provost. And this report followed on from consideration of the standing orders at the last meeting of Council on the 20th of September. And this report asks you to do three things. One is to approve the standing orders as attached to Appendix 2 to the report, and those give effect to the changes which have already agreed on September. But members may recall there were two issues that were continued for further consideration to this meeting. And the issues, firstly, of the size of committees and the political balance in light of the increase of the number of independents which are presently represented on the broader council. The issue was an issue raised at the meeting on the 24th of September, which was the issue of whether a member should require to be present at the Executive or Education Executive if the motion which they've made to Council stands referred to that particular body. Now, there's information on both the continued items within the report. The issue of size of committees and political balance largely carries forward the information which Council has already considered at its earlier meeting. I don't propose to go into that further. In relation to the question of the submission of a motion and a member to be present, there is further material in the report at paragraphs 4.5 and 7. So in summary, Provost, the Council has asked first of all simply to approve the changes already made. That's number one. To consider again the question of the size of committees and political balance, and lastly to consider the issue raised at the last meeting, which is the issue of the presence of members where a motion has been made.
Okay, thank you. Just for a bit of clarity, Mr Moody, in relation to there could be some dubiety whether maybe members are happy with one but aren't happy with the other. Would it be two different areas we'll be discussing then? Have you follow where I'm coming from? Just to keep it simple.
Sorry, Provost, just a brief microphone issue. That would be one way of dealing with it, Provost, but I think alternatively it could simply be dealt with by however the motion or amendments are that are moved at the meeting. So it may be as well to hear what is to be moved by the leader.
Perfect. Councillor Meikle.
Thank you, Provost. I think in relation to this, we need to be careful about not putting our council and the decision-making processes in a state of flux, as there has been a number of changes over the last couple of years already. Therefore, I'm happy to agree the standing orders as per the report and the changes that were already agreed. However, I would suggest that we look to maintain the status quo with regard to the committee sizes and the political balance, as again that is where we could end up as destabilising our decision-making process and going forward. And I think that the issues that we have around our independent members should hopefully be resolved in the very near future, and that way we can make a more informed view at that point if indeed there is a requirement to revisit that. In relation to members submitting motions that stand referred to the executive being present, and this is from my own experience of the committees and motions coming forward, the author of the motion not being present does leave members at a disadvantage when it comes to questioning and understanding. The author of the motion is the person who knows the most about the particular subject and indeed would have the passion to actually be able to express that. And without them being present, we lose out on that quality of information. While they can be supported by their colleagues, and quite rightly so, I think that it's important that the author of the motion should actually be present to be able to make that presentation. So I would continue to pursue that particular item.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. Can I agree with the Leader in the Council on the first two items, and also state that in committees when motions are brought forward, I think there's been some good examples. I think Councillor Murtagh in particular had a motion that was brought forward to executive, and it allowed everybody to ask a number of questions that even if you'd given somebody a briefing, they probably wouldn't have been able to answer. And it allowed that to go a lot smoother for everybody. It allowed full access to every party to speak to that person, so that you know the decision you're making based on that motion. And for that reason, I back exactly what I second exactly what the Leader of the Council has said.
Thanks, Provost. I think the standing orders, the review was brought forward by Councillor Reid, and it was needed to be done. You know, it was time for it to be reviewed, and I think it's been a fairly robust review. We would agree item 1, but we'd maintain the status quo for 2 and 3, because I think if somebody's briefed on a motion, they're more than capable of cascading that information out and taking questions. Because I mean, I don't know how many meetings we all go to, and you get briefings on it. Me in particular, if I go to a meeting, I'll come back to the group and cascade that information out to the group and take any questions on it. So I think we're more than capable of absorbing information and passing it out. So I really don't see that a member needs to be present at the executive meeting. So our amendment would be approve item 1, agree item 1, but status quo for 2 and 3.
Happy to second, Provost. And can I just say on the back of it, I think that actually if we insisted that movers of motions were present at every meeting, I think that stymies proper debate rather than helps it, because there may well be occasions for many, many reasons, whether it's sickness or anything else. If the mover of the motion can't physically be at the meeting, we're then saying that their thoughts and their proposals aren't relevant and couldn't be considered. I think this would be a backward step.
Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Provost. We are happy to approve revised standing orders, and in the question of committees and with regard to motions, we would move the status quo.
Provost. It was for a point of order. It was for a point of order, and Councillor Coombs, in relation to what you said there. I think the motion would just stand to the next meeting. It would come back. So if they were off ill, they could come to the next meeting with that motion.
We're in agreement that the size of the committees should remain the same, and that people should be able to come forward to speak at motion. Shouldn't need to be present at a motion, because there are circumstances in which people are unable to.
Thanks, Provost. On Councillor Gardner's point of order, it says in this motion quite clearly that the member submitting the motion must be present in order for that motion to be considered. Otherwise, the motion will fall regardless of the circumstances.
Provost.
Sorry.
It's appropriate to ask a question on the actual wording of the standing orders.
Yes, appropriate. Carry on.
Thank you. I'd just like to, the page 94 on the composition of the scrutiny committee. I find this extremely, I'm sorry to say this, but I find this very hard to get my head round because as far as I'm aware, every member of the committee of the council is entitled to attend the scrutiny committee, whereas this one is in actual fact inferring that the portfolio holder may actually attend, etc. Where I think it's unnecessary to say that. It's right to say that the portfolio holder would have the ability to ask questions, etc. But it doesn't make it very clear that, to me anyway, that any councillor is entitled to actually attend the scrutiny committee. It's sort of...
We'll get clarification for that, Councillor Patrick. Mr Moody?
Yes, thank you, Provost. This amendment follows on from the decision at the last meeting where the Council agreed that a portfolio holder could attend the scrutiny committee, but not only attend, but speak. So it gives the portfolio holder an opportunity to take part in the discussion at the scrutiny committee where the matter falls within their remit as portfolio holder. But you'll see, as the standing order is set out, that the portfolio holder may not vote in that situation. So it gives them the same situation as Councillor Patrick correctly points out in relation to performance reports, where all members of the council are entitled to attend the scrutiny committee and take part in the discussion, but not vote. And this extends that to portfolio holders in relation to matters within their portfolio remit. And that was the issue that was decided at council last time.
Provost, I'm sorry about this, but I'm still confused.com here, because I thought any member could go to any committee and sit at the back and take part. So if we're now getting told, when I thought this new information was that members could come to the scrutiny committee, that it was actually go and speak. So we're now getting clarified that it's only for the same as what happens in the executive or anywhere else. You can sit with members of the public.
No.
I suppose there's three different aspects then. So number one, Provost, the council is entirely correct. Any member can attend the committee. So there's no doubt about that. You can come and sit and observe any committee. More recently, the scrutiny committee remit was expanded so that when performance reports were being considered, any member of the council can come and participate in that discussion. So it's not sitting and observing what happens. They can come and be part of the discussion and speak, but not vote. And the change which took place at the last meeting was the suggestion that portfolio holders participate in discussion at the scrutiny committee where the matter fell within their remit. So it's extending the right to participate a bit beyond the performance reports into other reports, and that right is extended to portfolio holders. But the clarification is exactly the same as with members attending for performance reports. They can participate but not vote.
Okay, Councillor Murphy.
Yes, it was just on a point of further clarity, and perhaps officers could clarify this from the report. So on page 77, because I was kind of a similar mind to Councillor Garner, and I think that we're creating a problem here where it may not exist, because it doesn't stop at where the submitting member is not present, the motion falls immediately regardless of the circumstances. It then says, or would it automatically continue to the next meeting? And we're invited in this report to consider ahead, as far as I understand it, that's what we're agreeing recommendations that would then we would consider in the drafting for the next meeting, whether that would be an issue or not. So can we clarify that is an option for us?
Yes, that is an option, but it's not what's in the motion.
Okay. I mean, I think that there's merit. Certainly, and as Councillor Boyce was saying, that in members being present at the executive, and I think that although you can have a briefing, it's not actually it's not the same thing as what's in your mind by proposing the motion and having the scrutiny of the person there. And I think that it would be beneficial to make sure that that member could be at the executive. I make no bones about the fact that I think that the new model of executive is not the best for proportionality or scrutiny or anything, and does really need further consideration. But I think we have to take it a bit at a time, and I think that it is beneficial, given if you don't have the opportunity to address it full council here, to actually have it at the meeting.
Councillor Black, then Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, Provost, I've got every confidence that any member of my group could represent the motion that I put forward at the executive very well. there's lots of issues here. We're supposed to be a council, and we're supposed to be a local government that appreciates that people have got families, people are carers, people work, people have other jobs. It's supposed to be a part-time job. Most of us work a lot more than part-time hours. But at the end of the day, there's other councillors in this chamber that have other jobs. And do we really want to have a council where everybody's... we need people with different talents, different skills, and part of that reflects in people who are working and who have different business skills. Myself, I like to bring forward motions. I feel passionate about the motions I bring forward, but health board meetings, some months I've got 3 out of 4 Tuesdays I'm at health board for some reason or another, and I don't think that because I'm on the health board that should eliminate me from bringing motions forward. So I think there's lots of issues here. It's not as simple as just every member should be that puts a motion forward should be at the executive. We all have different responsibilities. Some of us have a scrutiny role. Some of us are on many different committees. We can't always be at the executive when the executive's running. And I think that any of the members in the group or the other group should be able to represent that person at that person's motion at the executive.
Thank you, Provost. I totally agree with Alison, but I also agree with Laura. This motion is asking us a question, Provost. Where a submitting member is not present, so it's asking us, does the motion fall immediately, regardless of the circumstances, or would it automatically be continued to the next question? So they're asking us their questions. So can I get clarity on whether it is that motion, or are we asking people for their views on that?
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Moody, clarify.
Thank you, Provost. I think Councillor Kerr is referring to the first bullet point at 4.6, which is in the report, but the motion, I think, answers the question and gives the answer that it would be the motion will fall regardless of the circumstances. So that's the motion as moved by the leader.
Okay.
Provost, if it helps, I would be happy to change the motion to it would automatically continue to the next meeting if that would be more favourable to members, but I suspect not.
We're trying to get some sort of consensus here. Members, we don't want to members have heard what Councillor Michael John has said. The members have put forward the amendment. Are you happy to take the information that you've just had, or are you happy to still go with your amendment?
Can I ask a question, just a follow-up question that's occurred? Because I understand the points about another member of the group representing, but we have a number of independents in this chamber, and obviously when people are proposing motions, they are proposing them in their own name, and it's sort of, it doesn't really give that opportunity that you're saying, well, another member, it's not somebody who moves it, but I think it has to be said that what can be happening here is that it's actually that members put forward a motion in their own name, and they're really, in some ways, if they're not able to attend, and denied the opportunity to represent what they mean and to speak. So I'd like some, that point to be made in the debate, and maybe some clarity from.
Thank you, Provost. And the motion which you've had distributed to you is moved by Councillor Michael John and seconded by Councillor Bowes, against which there's an amendment moved by Councillor Bissett and seconded by Councillor Coombs, which differs from the motion to the extent of maintaining the status quo at number 3 in the recommendations. Provost Buchanan.
Amendment.
Councillor Aitchison. Councillor Balfour. Councillor Binney. Councillor Bissett. Councillor Black. Councillor Blackwood. Councillor Bowes. Councillor Coleman. Councillor Colley. Councillor Coombs. Councillor Flynn. Councillor Garner. Councillor Grant. Councillor Harris. Councillor Hughes. Councillor Kerr. Councillor McCluckie. Councillor Meiklejohn. Councillor Monroe. Councillor Murtagh. Councillor Nicholl. Councillor Nimmo. Councillor Patrick. Councillor Reid. And Councillor Spears. Provost, there are 10 votes for the motion, there are 16 votes for the amendment, and the amendment is accordingly carried.
Obviously, I'm watching the clock in terms of stopping for lunch, but we're going to go into item 9 just now. It's the Revenue Budget Medium-Term Financial Plan, pages 96 to 103 in your agenda papers, and Mr Smale will be speaking to the report and available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost, and good afternoon. This report has 3 strands to it. The first one deals with the implications of the general election, putting back the date of the Scottish Government budget. The second strand deals with the IJB business plan, and the third strand deals with the position on council tax. So, dealing with the first of these, the Scottish Government, not unreasonably, have advised, in association with the relevant Holyrood Parliamentary Committee, that they cannot do their own budget until such time as the Westminster budget is passed. So the expectation is that at best that probably won't be until early February. The Cabinet Secretary has engaged with COSLA to discuss and explore some of the logistical issues, and there are quite a few of them that flow from that. I've said in the paper that I might be in a position to give a verbal update on how those deliberations are going. There's been no new substantive information forthcoming. There was, as I'm led to believe, an update provided to leaders on Friday, but nothing flowing from that changes what's already been advised. So we're currently positioned as a council for our budget meeting on the 26th of February, albeit the HRA, as has been the custom in recent years, is considered by the January council meeting. So that helps somewhat. But there's clearly going to be an incredibly compressed time frame from whenever the Scottish Government budget is held. And actually, it's less the budget, it's more the settlement, the attendant settlement that flows from it that's of particular interest to us in terms of the primary element in our budget equation, the revenue support grant. I've included, again, in the report, the table that was presented to the meeting in October, the budget report then, and as will be evident from the content, some will need to change, but until we get further intelligence, we can't be any more specific than that. Some elements will hold. And the final paragraph in that section, I think, is very important, that notwithstanding those external factors that we're just going to have to deal with, the core matter of addressing the budget gap of 20 million still remains. We're currently in December, and even with a degree of slippage, as I've outlined, there's still an awful lot of work to be done to get to a position where we meet the statutory requirement to produce a balanced budget. So, the second strand in the report deals with the business case for the IJB. That's the next item in the agenda. So all I'll do is briefly paint a few points by way of context. So the first one perhaps is to say the IJB has been given a target of circa 3 million in terms of the target budget savings is to make. That's equivalent to all services and the trust in terms of how we plan to meet the 20 million deficit. It is for the IJB board to determine what its budget will be within the context of the financial envelope it has from both ourselves and the health board. But the Council does retain responsibility for fees and charges in that mix. So, as I say, a target of circa 3 million. In the next agenda item, you'll see how the IJB proposes to meet that target. The third strand is with respect to council tax, and this replicates what we've done in recent years, whereby we invite council to take a provisional view, and I underline, as a report does, the word provisional view on council tax ahead of the actual meeting where it's decided. By so doing, it just gives a bit of firmness and substance to the difficult equation of balancing the budget. But it's not a requirement, it's an option which we think will be helpful in terms of the financial planning and the logistics of the budget. This part of the report essentially splits into two elements. The first part, and I think the more straightforward one, is the 3% that we're allowed to increase council tax by, and that flows from the removal of the freeze, which applied for circa a decade. So there's headroom to raise the council tax by 3%. The 20 million gap that I referred to earlier already presumes that 3% is taken, so where a decision ultimately taken not to increase the tax by 3%, the deficit you need to plug would rise accordingly. The tables in the report show the consequence of different percentage rises in terms of the yield and also the impact on band D, which is the reference point. The element in the paper that's different from last year is the option to increase that 3% by an inflation element, which will be in the order of 1.5%, perhaps a little bit more. And what the paper is inviting you to consider is harnessing that marginal difference, that extra 1.5% or so, circa 1.5%. So the council tax would rise by roughly 4.5%. And use that additional element, this additional flexibility, to lever up potentially very significant capital investment. The yield from that circa extra 1.5% is about £1 million. That £1 million in turn allows you to gear up your borrowing by about 20 million. And moreover, as long as this flexibility remained, we could do that each year. So over the course of the capital programme, which is 5 years, if this flexibility was retained during that whole period, potentially you could lever up something in the order of an extra 100 million in capital investment. And as the report says, investment of that magnitude is clearly a game changer. So, and also an important context there for members to be alert to, basically a forewarning. The capital programme, General Services capital programme, which is currently being worked up, is clearly under immense pressure. And you'll see the specific evidence of that when it comes before you. And we're scheduled to produce that for you at the Member Budget Working Group later this month on the 17th of December. So you'll see the scale of the challenge on the capital side, just to sit alongside the challenge we face on the revenue side. And perhaps just to note also that those entitled to council tax reduction will be protected from any rise that at the end of the day you decide to make. So to the conclusions, the first one invites you to note the report. The second one, reflecting what I've just said in council tax, splits it into the two elements. First one dealing with the more conventional 3%, and the second part focused on the option of harnessing that extra circa 1.5% and inviting you to consider whether you might want to direct that to significant capital investment. Happy to try and address any questions members have, Provost.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Provost. I think you know, we need to listen very carefully to Mr Smale, particularly around our budget setting process, and that while we know that things are in a state of flux with the UK election, which is coming up next week, and the formation of obviously a Westminster government to be able to provide a budget down to Scottish Government, we also have to be mindful that the other side of all of that will be a very short period of time, because at the moment we have to statutorily set our council tax by mid-March. And therefore, once we actually have details, we're going to have a very truncated period in which to put our budget together. Therefore, I think it's important that we continue to progress with that process. I think, as we did last year, is look provisionally in setting our council tax rise at 3% is a reasonable thing to do, and that helps enable the planning process for the budget to be able to go ahead based on those assumptions, and it's something that I think councils up and down the country have already done in doing that. Therefore, I think subject to obviously the final decisions coming forward, then I think that we should be looking to do that and keep it at the 3% at that base rate. However, I think we should explore further the supplementation of the inflationary rise of the 1.5% and what that actually could deliver for Falkirk and for Falkirk Council residents as a whole. I would suggest that we do give that consideration, increasing the 1.5% to leave it in, but for that to be ring-fenced for capital investment that can take place right across the council district, and is focused on enabling the economy, enabling jobs, but also looking at where we can reduce the longer-term cost pressures around our revenue budget and reducing the pressures there. Therefore, I would like to suggest that we agree to, in principle, the 3% rise, but with the 1.5% lever in for capital, and ask Office to bring forward draft proposals. Now, these draft proposals aren't going to be necessarily things that Council would take forward. It's actually an example, for instance, of what that capital could maybe do within our communities right across the council area. And that would just act as a stimulus for members to actually look at that in more detail to see what it actually could deliver for us. 1 year, £1 million, 20 million investment could actually, for example, be invested in our sports and leisure facilities across the area. We know we have ageing buildings. We know we need to release some of the assets that we've got because they're no longer fit for purpose. But that's something that we could see as being very, very tangible to our communities. It would also enable us to go out and do a little bit of consultation with the community and take a measure in how they would feel about that 1.5% being used and being used for that specific purpose, to enable that to happen. Because I think we might be surprised about how positively that might be received. So I would certainly see that we should explore that further. Look at it in a wee bit more detail with the for instances by way of a draft programme or a suggestion programme being brought forward to members in January, in order to have some of those more informed discussions about how we go forward and look at where potentially that can give us better benefits for our citizens and indeed help take some pressure off the revenue budget going forward. I have that in an amendment which officers have, and that would then be my motion. We still have to look at the Integrated Joint Board and Falkirk Community Trust, which will come later. And we know that there's a variety of pressures around there. and if we are to continue to support both of those organisations going forward, I think capital investment is going to be key. And I'm sure that in due course each of the two bodies will be able to demonstrate the need for that, whether it be through, for example, intermediate care facility or investment in some of the facilities that the Trust manage. And therefore move the motion, Provost.
Can I formally second and reserve the right to come back in?
Members take an opportunity to look at that. If you need some time, we're at 1:45, and what we could do, depending on whether you're agreeable, we could break for lunch, then we could come back here at 1:30, which give groups an opportunity to study that. So we come back in at 1:30, we'll refresh with your lunch, and you've had an ideal opportunity. It's up to yourselves. Are members happy with that? Okay, so we'll come back here. That gives the two groups there an opportunity during this period of time before 1:30 to come back in here, replenish with food, and also a clear mind. Thank you very much for that. We'll reconvene. Just to let you know where we are, we've had this motion by Councillor Meiklejohn moved and seconded. There was an opportunity during the... We're just waiting Councillor Murtagh coming in. Thank you. Perfect. There was an opportunity for opposition groups to have a look at that during the lunch break. So I'm coming to Councillor Bissett.
Thanks very much, Provost. It's that time again where we've got to look at the finances, and we're certainly scrutinising that in great detail. Very difficult to make these cuts, but nevertheless we're working hard on it. To try and basically, like last year, we were going to put up the council tax to free up the revenue that would offset the cuts. So this year we're being asked to raise the council tax to 3%, which we do agree. But on item 2, we feel it's too premature to make that decision on 1.5% that would raise the £20 million worth of capital. So I would make an amendment that we note the report and we would accept item 1, but item 2 we wouldn't accept. I think we've not got any the budget settlement for Westminster or Holyrood yet, so it is really premature. Item 1 only.
Thank you, Provost. As Robert has just indicated, we feel that we would like to accept the first recommendation. On recommendation 2, to consider supplementing the increase with the inflation element to lever additional capital investment. I'm not quite sure what that entails, but I feel that at this moment in time, we will stick with the 3% also.
That seems...
Provost, can I just ask for a little bit of clarity in that Robert said that he's accepting item 1. Now, is that just to note the report, or is it item 1 by raising the council tax by 3%?
Sorry, Provost. Item 1, 2.11, note the report, we agree that. And 2.1, I agree with the 3% increase in council tax, but not item 2.
Thank you for that.
Yes, please. Thank you, Provost. I understand where the opposition parties are coming from. However, what this is asking for is a provisional acceptance of something, and it's asking that then there's draft investment comes up. And I know we've struggled a wee bit this year getting things at the minute we mention investment to come forward. I know we've struggled to get that forward and get that moving as quickly as possibly we should have. We're not asking, this is, as it says in the report, it is provisional. We're in a fortunate situation in Falkirk where I think we have got one of the lowest, I think it's the 4th lowest council tax in Scotland. I think the other 3 are islands. I might be wrong in that, but I think the other 3 are islands. So last year, and as Councillor Bissett has said, I think you proposed the 4.79% rise. So we're not even going to the full 4.79. This would have given Falkirk a chance to be a game changer, to actually invest on property, on capital projects. It's £100 million over a 5-year period. £100 million. We're trying to give you the option. It is a provisional decision to close it down at this stage without even getting a chance to consider it. Seems to me personally slightly unreasonable. We've had a number of investment programmes, as I've said. There was one came forward in June. It ended up getting delayed until I think it was a September meeting, which is why one of the reasons we now have to wait for the trust to come back in January. When we get to the back end of the year, as has been already said, we have a situation here where we have a general election on at the moment, so therefore there's no budget getting done by Westminster. Therefore the Scottish Government can't set its budget. We're working to put our budget together, because when you get to the back end of this, when it all comes out in the fire, as they say, we're going to be in a situation that we're going to have to make relatively quick decisions. It's easier to put stuff back in than it is to take out. So if we look at this as a potential, as it says, as a provisional here, it's something that if it's decided at that point, and we will have another opportunity to debate it, it gives us a chance at actually moving forward as a council, rather than stagnating and doing nothing again. I'm sorry, but it's got to be said again. We have unfortunately held up too often. We need to move forward. We need to invest in Falkirk, because the people of Falkirk deserve us to invest it. Here, we're using money which is council tax money. We're ring-fencing it so that it actually gets used for that purpose. I don't understand the delay that people want to have in this, and I ask you to please reconsider and please think about what you're doing here. It's a potential here to move Falkirk forward.
Thank you, Provost. This raises a number of issues with me, but once again, it seems to me that we've been asked to take potential significant financial decisions where most of the members in this chamber have not got the full facts. Now, for the first wind we got of this was at the budget working group just a couple of weeks ago, where this 1.5% might be available. There's no question at that time of saying that this would be capital. We were sitting with a 20 million budget deficit, which we haven't quite met yet. I just wonder what the good people of Falkirk would think if we hike their council tax by another 1.5%, but instead of putting it into repairing potholes and giving them the services that they have lost over the last few years because of the budget cuts, or indeed don't preserve some of the budget cuts that we're going to have to make in order to meet that budget deficit. I'm not sure that
we're going to that they're going to sit easily with that against the promise of this massive investment. The other thing that concerns me, and this is where again we're lacking in information about being able to take this decision now, I'm not saying for a minute that we should throw this out completely. That would be a bit like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. But I just don't think at this particular moment, at this particular meeting, enough members of the council, enough of the elected members, have the information necessary to make an informed decision. Now, the finance director did allude to the fact that there were issues with the current capital programme, which were going to be brought to light in the next meeting of the budget working group, which is not until January, I think. It may be that people on the other benches have more information than we've got, but I'm certainly not happy that I have enough information to make this decision at this time. And I say, I'm not throwing it out altogether. I just don't think that we should be making such a significant decision, because these things can grow arms and legs. Once decided that the 1.5% is on, and we've sent officers to look at the proposals, then it almost becomes a fait accompli. So I would certainly be against that.
Provost, could I clarify that, please? As I think there's... yes, it's absolutely about clarity. There's no decisions being taken today. There is no decision on actually taking that 1.5%. That flexibility was afforded to us last year. We can't guarantee it will definitely be afforded to us this year. However, if it is afforded to us, then there is an opportunity for Council to look at that. And asking officers to bring forward proposals, these are suggestions, these are what this could look like, and that's exactly what I'd said previously. It's not any firm proposals, and it'd be then up to members to say at this stage, because I think we need to look at how we can get investment.
Councillor Black.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. The 1.5% is an attractive proposition, and one that the Labour group did bring up last year at the budget. However, I do agree it's too early to decide this just now. We don't have any numbers from Holyrood and we don't have them from Westminster, and we won't until next year. And I'd also like to see greater member involvement in any proposals, because we're the people who know what our communities need and desire. And next week we have a report going to the executive about the Town Centre Capital Fund. And I do understand the difference between capital and revenue, but at the same time, I had meetings 2 years ago with retailers in Grangemouth, and they were very specific in the types of things that would help them to have a successful business and to sustain their business in Grangemouth Town Centre. So I think that we need to include the business community, small retailers in the districts, and ask them what they think they need and what they want, because currently we're not asking them, and they're the ones that are suffering just now. Grangemouth and Bowness have suffered in particular in recent years with lack of investment, and they really need to see something soon. But I think we need to involve the smaller retailers and other people in the business community in those town centres, and not concentrate so much in Falkirk. Thank you, Provost.
Okay, thank you. Provost, can I have a point of clarity, please? Can I have a point of clarity? I'm sorry, but I did stand up, and I was... Hopefully I was quite clear that you're not actually being asked to take the up to 4.5% today. That is not what you're being asked, and unfortunately the last two speakers from the opposition benches, that's exactly what they've said. It's not that. I'm sorry, but if you can read it again, please. This is provisional, and that's unfortunately that's not the way it's been portrayed. And I did at length talk about it being provisional. Can everybody please remember that it's a provisional?
Can I just come back in, because I'm being told that I've misunderstood the paper and what's written in front of me. Provost, I can see very clearly here, and what I was saying is that officers have been asked to bring forward the draft proposals, and of course we have to have officers taking a lead in this, but I still think it's very important that small retailers and small businesses themselves have something to say in this.
Before we call in Councillor Patrick, I'm going to go to Mr Moody, maybe a wee bit of Dubai to hear about the terminology and the implications. So I'll ask Mr Moody just to clarify exactly what the terms the motion is.
Thank you, Provost. I think it's worth just having in mind that you will not be setting the council tax until the revenue budget meeting in late February. The motion and the recommendations ask you to provisionally, so the key word there is provisionally, set the council tax subject to the final decisions when setting the revenue budget. So it's giving an indication of what the council is minded to do, but not a final decision in relation to it.
You still have got an opportunity to voice any concerns or any ideas that you have in your own mind. Councillor Patrick.
Thank you, Provost. I do understand that in the recommendations the word consider is very prominent there, and I do accept that we have got the opportunity in the future to consider further exactly how we proceed. The fact is, however, that we are being asked to consider the using of the 1.5% additional lever additional capital investment of 20 million. My problem is simply that I feel that in some ways we're beginning to confuse revenue with capital. Of course, the 20 million, if borrowed, would be capital, but the £1 million presumably, yes, would be a way of servicing during the year the borrowing. But £20 million, there's no indication whatsoever as to what the term envisaged of this. There's no indication here as to how exactly the £20 million will be repaid. Certainly not from the £1 million that's being proposed today. And therefore, perhaps the Director of Finance could give us a bit more information as to how exactly this £20 million, if borrowed, how it would be actually repaid and what the repercussions to the revenue would be as a result.
Yes, excuse me. The £1 million raised by council tax, in effect, is locked in. So that's £1 million every year. So your debt repayment over 20 years would be £1 million. That element of the council tax raised by that marginal increase of circa, and I use the word circa every time I mention the 1.5% because the figure hasn't been defined, but it's around, it will be around 1.5%. So that element of council tax is earmarked to repay the debt. So a 20-year debt, 20 annual slices of £1 million from council tax would cover it off. So in those terms, it's revenue neutral, though I would add the one caveat, dependent on what capital spend you undertook. There could be other revenue costs. I mean, classically, if I use an example, were it to be a new school, if that would have to be populated by further teachers, you would have heat, light and power. So you would have to have regard to that dimension in your decision making. But in broad terms, the debt, the key element of your cost, would be covered by that element of council tax. And can I just say, Provost, I do understand the comments that have been made by members about not having complete information, which is a statement of fact. The primary purpose was really to ventilate the idea and get it into play so members would have an opportunity to think about it. As we've heard from previous comments, by definition, we're going to have an incredibly compressed time frame within which to make decisions. And the more we can position ourselves, more accurately, you can position yourselves to be fleet-footed and have a clearer idea of what you're minded to do, subject to having access to all the information. And on the point of the pressures under the General Services Capital Programme, the Member Budget Working Group, the cross-party working group meeting on the 17th of December, will have access to the full picture in terms of resources we think we have, the bids that are in, and there's an overlay of contextual examples. And if I can give you a further example of just the pressure we're facing, on the agenda for the December executive, there's a report on the Council tackling the climate challenge. And mentioned in that report is a provisional estimate of somewhere between 12 and 40 million to help tackle it. That's not even factored into the frame yet. So just a simple illustration. But members at the meeting on the 17th of December will see the full picture in terms of the pressures in the capital programme that I've mentioned.
Would you allow me to come back in? Yes. Thank you, Provost. Thank you, Mr Smale, for that. I would, however, like to make it clear, or that members will understand fully, that in fact we are now talking about a 20 borrowing. We are talking about locking to a 4.5% or so council, or it's an increased council tax for the next 20 years. We are talking about borrowing over that period against revenue which will be in considerable demand each year to meet the normal requirements that we have, the decisions that we have to make so difficult so each year. And therefore, in actual fact, it has been talked, I think I've heard it talked in this chamber, the fact that yes, over a 5-year period, we could get up to 100 million. This really has got to be corrected, because in actual fact what we're talking about is using the million increase each year over the next 5 years to continue to start a repayment of the capital of the 20 million, and it will go on for another 15 years after that.
Thanks, Convener. Convener, we've been told we're not taking a decision today on the 1.5% additional increase in council tax. However, Councillor Bowes certainly created an impression there that by not accepting this 1.5%, we're stopping the progression of Falkirk Council. He's got a short memory, because the Scottish Government stopped the progression of Falkirk Council for 10 years with a council tax freeze.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Falkirk.
Thanks, Provost. I certainly agree with my learner friend in the front, Councillor Patrick, with experience in banking, to go and talk about these things. Because it's quite clear, me and Councillor Kerr, you took a decision earlier on the day that we didn't get a place in committees, and that's democracy, and I'm always happy to go with democracy. However, you talk about budget working groups and the trust working groups and all these working groups that go there. We're knowing them. We didn't get that information. So some of you are discussing shared visions, or some people's personal vision, or the council's vision for the future. We didn't ken what the vision is. Certainly not in that paper there they knew. So I'm not voting at nothing until I get the same information as you. We didn't go along to group meetings and get an update from members, because we didn't go to the group meetings. So as I say, we don't get that information. And as I say, the day that we get furnished with the same information that every other member of this council's got, then I'll be happy to go and look at this decision. The 1.5%, as Councillor Patrick says, we were on earlier on about another item, with a £20 million revenue gap to try to meet. And now we're talking about a different 20 million, which is capital, right? And it may be that we all agree that 1.5% is good, and that would probably be the way. But whether we'll need it for the revenue, or whether it would be better to go to the capital, depends on getting the facts and getting the information, kenning what the budget is, and then we make the decision. So thank you very much for that.
Sum up. Thank you. A couple of points. Again, not be asked to make decisions. It's an unprincipled agreement that we're looking for Council to look at the potential of the 1.5% to be used, to be ring-fenced for capital. And I'm going to be interested to see what the other groups say when they're looking for investment, capital investment within their particular wards coming forward, and the fact that the capital budget is under pressure and may not be able to deliver that. So we've got a vehicle where we could be looking at that delivery. Just very quickly on the Town Centre Fund, the Town Centre Fund that came from Scottish Government, the 1.9 million, the projects that went into that was consulted on with the communities and with the local members. In Bowness, Grangemouth and in Falkirk. And I certainly know in Falkirk it aligns with the action plan and the locality plans in Grangemouth, and I know that there was discussions particularly with the Community Council on the projects in Bowness, and they were all content with that, and that's why those were taken forward to where they are, and they'll come forward next week. Council tax freeze was there for a reason, and it was fully funded and some by the Scottish Government. People just forget to actually recognise that. Borrowing as any capital projects that we have, we usually look for borrowing. It's not anything that's unusual. It's something that councils do, and we have been very prudent in doing that going forward. As a result, we don't have a large amount of borrowing there, but we do have the need for investment right across our council area. Councillor McCluckie, if you want information, you've got the same access to officers that I do. You can ask them for any information at any time, and I'm sure Mr Smale will be more than happy to brief you on the budget. We've given an opportunity and we've given a way forward for the council. By delaying means we are going to end up with a budget position, and if there is a view to start to do this, we are going to be a few months behind, and as a result the delivery of anything around the capital, as you know, Provost, takes time, and it's an explanation to our communities. And I do believe that we would have a very good story to take out to our communities by going and speaking to them and saying this is what we would like to do and this is what we could deliver on your behalf. So I think while I'm cautious as well, I don't know whether we're going to get that, but I'm happy that, to go and look at it and to look at what we can deliver through this, and we're actually actively encouraged to look at delivering in a different way. Need to remember that these projects can be very focused. These can be focused on helping us reduce our revenue budget pressures. So that will then help the future demand, and we can tailor projects accordingly. So I think it's very narrow-minded and short-sighted of the opposition not to have a look at this and going forward at this time, and leaves us very much behind the curve, and that's what's happened over the last 10 years in this council.
Thank you very much for that. Just to let you know, should have said it originally, that Councillor Reid had to leave us. He had some business that he had to attend to, and he couldn't wait. So apologises for that.
Yes, thank you, Provost. The motion has been circulated. It's moved by Councillor Meikle-John, seconded by Councillor Bowes, against which there's an amendment moved by Councillor Bissett and seconded by Councillor Coombs. And that's to the effect of agreeing number 1 to note the report, and agreeing 2.1 the provisional rise to the council tax of 3%, but not items 2 and 3. Okay. Provost Buchanan.
Amendment.
Councillor Balfour. Councillor Binney. Councillor Bissett. Councillor Black. Councillor Blackwood. Councillor Bowes. Councillor Coleman. Councillor Colley. Councillor Coombs. Councillor Flynn. Councillor Garner. Councillor Grant. Councillor Harris. Councillor Hughes. Councillor Kerr. Councillor McCluckie. Councillor Meikle-John. Councillor Monroe. Councillor Murtagh. Councillor Nicholl. Councillor Trick. Councillor Spears. Provost, there are 10 votes for the motion, 15 for the amendment, and the amendment is accordingly carried.
Okay, thank you. Today, it's Falkirk Integration Joint Board Business Case 2020-2021. It's pages 104 to 117. We'll have officers here that's going to read the report. I wonder if you could just introduce yourself, tell us your designation, and then carry on and be ready for any questions, okay? Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Patricia Cassidy. I'm Chief Officer for the Integration Joint Board and Director of the Health and Social Care Partnership.
Good afternoon, my name is Amanda Templeman. I'm the Chief Finance Officer
for the Health and Social Care Partnership and Integration Joint Board. So I'm going to start and cover some of the finance information that's in the business case, and then pass over to Patricia, and Patricia will pick up the service delivery and some of the savings information. I think it's important just to note that this paper hasn't been to the IGB yet. We have our IGB on Friday, and at that meeting we're going to consider the medium-term financial plan for the IGB and also the delivery plan, which are two much more detailed documents. This report is a summary of the key information that's provided in there, and that follows the requirements of the integration scheme in terms of what we present to yourselves and to the Health Board in order to receive our funding. So because of the timing of the meetings, this business case hasn't been to the IGB, and what we've said is that we will verbally feed back to the IGB the information, the feedback and conversation that comes out from today's discussion. So if I just start by talking briefly about section 4 of the paper, which sets out the financial performance of the IGB for 1920, and that's really just to put the context of the sort of budget savings ask, to provide a bit of context to that. So our latest projection is an overspend of just over 3.5 million, and that's across the partnership. Now, to put that into some context, the total budget of the partnership is 229 million. And the split of that budget in terms of expenditure is roughly 87 million for adult social work, which is about 38% of the budget. And 142 million of that, which is about 62%, goes towards health services. And that covers a mixture of things like our large hospital budgets, our community hospitals, our community services, prescribing and GP-led services. The table at paragraph 4.1 breaks that overspend down into some various categories. The first one is the budgets delegated to Falkirk Council non-HRA. So that's really our core adult social work services, and it's really about home care is our biggest pressure area at the moment, and that's where we're projecting that overspend. Budgets delegated to NHS Forth Valley, which is the 1.394 million in the table, that's mainly around prescribing. That's our biggest issue within the sort of community services and GP sort of led services for the Health Board. And then you'll see there's a figure under set aside budget of 1.461 million, and that's our large hospital budget. So that's things like A&E and services provided within Forth Valley Royal. I think it's important to note that all of the pressures that are resulting in these overspends are pressures that have been there for a number of years. They're recurring year on year. And so one of the key things that we need to do as an integrated joint board is really start to tackle some of those areas. But it does demonstrate that the ongoing pressures in these areas of the system. We don't have a resolution at this point in time for how that overspend will be met. And paragraph 4.3 and 4.4 touches on that a little bit. In terms of the adult social work overspend, we have a recovery plan that we've developed with the heads of integration. And that's really looking at how we scrutinise particularly some of the external packages of care. So we are hopeful that we can bring that back to balance by the end of the financial year. And so we're hopeful that we won't be needing to use any sort of non-recurring funding or anything to balance that budget. In terms of the overspend on the health services side, we don't have that same level of confidence that the overall 2.8 million on the health side will be met, and we have been informed that NHS Forth Valley would like a contribution from reserves, from IGB reserves, to offset that. But those discussions are still ongoing at this point. But it does highlight that we're going into 2021 with these recurring pressures still not having been fully addressed. The information in sections 5 and 6 of the business case is based on the best information that we have available at this time. As Brian's already raised today, there's lots of unknowns, not least when the budget will be coming in and what that budget will say. And you know, in prior years, there has been restrictions in terms of the funding reductions that can be made for IGBs. So that will have quite a big impact on the information in the tables at 5.1 and 6.1. But we have used the best information that we have at this time. And there's also a number of assumptions in there for various inflationary factors. So, for example, for our Falkirk Council related spend, we have assumptions in there around inflation for external providers, which we're very reliant on. And some of the early indications are that that might not be quite sufficient, but we're still sort of waiting to see what some of the asks that come in from the providers, but it's an area we're keeping a close eye on, an area of pressure. So taken together, the tables at 5.1 and 6.1 give us a funding gap for 2021 of 7.024 million. And just 3.091 of that is for adult social work. At this point in time, in terms of the business case in front of you and the appendix to the business case, we have identified 2.2 million of savings that we think are achievable against that target of 3.091. At this point, the business case and the medium-term financial plan that's going to the IGB on Friday doesn't set out detailed savings options for the Health Board, but we are working with the Health Board to try and identify some more detailed savings and to look at what the kind of key work streams are that we need to explore to try and bridge that financial gap.
Thank you. I'll just skim through some of the other information in the paper. In section 7, it outlines some of the information in relation to operational performance, and that's in relation to a performance against delayed discharges, our rates of admission to care homes, and also the number of hours of home care that we deliver. So on table 1 on page 108, you will see our performance on delayed discharge bed days rate compared to the rest of Scotland. Falkirk is about number 7 down from the top, not the top in terms of poor performance. We are 7th from the top in that yellow line, in showing quite a significant number of bed days lost through delays in discharge. We're peculiar compared to the rest of Scotland in that our delays in discharge are primarily from Falkirk Community Hospital. 87% of them are in Falkirk Community Hospital, whereas nationally there's only about 42% of delays in community hospitals. The rest are usually in the acute hospital site. So there's a peculiar issue there about where people are being delayed from, and actually can we get people straight home instead of them going to the community hospital. What sort of support do we have in the community to enable that, and in terms of HP, physiotherapy and OT support to help with that. Table 2 shows our performance in relation to the other authorities in the rate of people who are supported in care homes. The red line in that graph is the Scottish average, and you'll see, along with some other authorities, Falkirk is above that red line in terms of the number of people that are cared for in care homes. Table 3 shows the number of care home hours provided per 1,000 of the adult population, comparing Falkirk with Scotland. And you will see Falkirk is significantly higher, with 23 people compared to the Scottish average of 15.5, and that's per 1,000 of the population. So if you multiply that up to our population, it's quite significant. So we have a pattern in Falkirk of people being admitted to care homes younger than the rest of Scotland, and they're staying in longer. And that means that the care home places are not available for flow through for other people that need them. There's no epidemiological evidence that would suggest that people in Falkirk have poorer health than other areas, so that points to it's a process issue about the way that we are assessing and care planning for people. We've developed a delivery plan which is outlined in section 8 of the report, and this is based on the activities that we set out in the business plan that came to Council this time last year. You will see at table 5 the outline of the high-level actions within year 1, year 2 and year 3 of the plan. What we need to do with the resource challenge that we have is actually to look at how we can redesign our services. The vision for the IGB is to support more people to live at home independently for longer, and it's how do we do that? How do we meet the increasing demand that we're facing through the increasing growth in people aged over 75 and over 85? And that's really got to be through system redesign and actually outcome-focused practice and actually talking to people and their families about what they need and what they want to support them in their community. Elected members were very supportive about 18 months ago when we were going through the redesign of services for younger adults with learning disabilities. And we approached that in that collaborative way, talking through a series, I think we had 38 consultation events with those individuals to identify how we could provide our services better. And we have done that, and we can demonstrate that. We still have 2 buildings-based services, but we closed 2 buildings, but improved outcomes for the young people who previously used the service. And that's been really a positive experience, and that's what we're planning to do in looking at all areas of our service in the next few years in order to deliver better outcomes, but also to work within the resource package that we have. So in order to do that, you'll see in section 9 a programme of the areas of service change and transformation. What we need to do is look across the whole system, look and see if we've got enough in our community to support our GPs, to help people stay out of hospital if they don't need to be in an acute hospital. And that's really key, that we have enough interventions available in communities to support people who maybe just need antibiotics for a few days. Can we actually do that in their own home, or can we do that in an intermediate care facility? In Falkirk at the moment, the only way you can get into the community hospital is if you've been in the acute hospital first. So we're actually driving people into the acute hospital. So we need to look through a review of the community hospitals. What are we using them for, and what do we need them to be used for? What level of residential and care home provision do we need? What level of care at home do we need? And what level of other interventions and community supports do we need? And that's the schedule that we're on, that is set out in the diagram in table 5. Really looking at, have we got the right mix of the right resource in the right place? We will continue to develop the Living Well Falkirk brand that we've started through the website and through the first Living Well Centre that has been developed in the Sensory Centre in Camlin, and we'll look to expand that. So how are we going to achieve financial balance? So that's set out in section 10 of the report, and really looking at how do we manage our demand? How good is our assessment and care planning processes? Do we need to shift away from that traditional approach to actually looking at more outcome-focused and strengths-based practice, which has been successful elsewhere? We need to be good at reviewing care packages to ensure that as people recuperate, that actually we can reduce a care package if that's appropriate. We need to look at redesigning residential care and improving the efficiency and alignment of our home care service and also our external providers, and continue a review of day service provision. Within the health service, we need to look at prescribing, at acute services within set aside, the community hospitals, as I mentioned, and also complex care. There is some ongoing work to shift that model of care, but also instrumental to how we will change will be the development of integrated locality teams. We don't yet have operational transfer of the health service staff, but we are hoping that will happen within the next few months, and we will then be able to develop these strong integrated teams at a locality level, which will match up with the work that's going on within the Enabling Communities work within the Community Planning Partnership, and really start to build at a locality level links with the community organisations, primary care, social care and others. And as elected members, you should begin to see a real positive change in that regard within your wards. There's a section on section 14 on capital planning, which just outlines there's a small investment for the MEC service and for changing places toilets that is still underway, and the council's also committed, there's £3.7 million capital for a new intermediate care facility. The NHS have indicated that they're going to do a review of the community hospital site, and we will work together on that to look at the intermediate care facility and also how we can maximise any investment that's going into that site. In Appendix 1, the partnership savings proposals are summarised, and you will see that those include a review of the existing care packages for younger adults, review of the care packages for low-level supports for older adults, external home care, our residential provision, shifting the balance of bed-based care within adult social work, looking at the daycare review for older adults, and at the bottom, the inflationary uplift to charging. The uplift to charging would be a decision for the council, not for the IGB, and the proposal there is just for the inflationary uplift, which is what is also proposed for charging across the council, but that would come back to a further meeting of the council. So members of council are asked to consider the information contained within the business case and provide feedback, which, as Amanda has said, we will take back to the IGB meeting on Friday. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that very full report. Such a lot of content in that, loads of areas where I'm sure that members are involved with in their own communities, and some good news and some sort of concerning news contained there. Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, Provost. This is really, it's a report for information for members, therefore I wouldn't anticipate at this stage that there's going to be any amendments, and it is around feedback to the IGB. I think I want to start by just highlighting that there has been significant savings made by the IGB, particularly in social care over the last few years, of over £6 million. And that has been no mean feat, considering where we were with the constant overspends within that service over that time. And in doing so, they have delivered service change and delivered that service change as an improvement to services. Therefore, that gives great confidence to those that are within the service, and particularly under the leadership of Patricia and going forward. There is the issue of the overspend, but I'm comfortable with the recovery plan that's in place, and hopefully that will be achievable to get us as close to balance, if not financial balance, as possible. And again, that is a reputation the IGB has had of being able to deliver on that. So I think that's something that we need to have a bit of confidence in. The overall overspend of the IGB, as has been indicated, is not all within our control, and within the Health and Social Care Partnership. And as we are yet not fully integrated, it is difficult to be able to have an influence on that, and that is something that is ongoing, and we do hope to be able to resolve. And as Patricia's indicated, that the transfer of the operational staff hope to happen very soon, and that will then enable us to have some greater in-depth oversight and influence in going forward. Because what we do have to look at is a whole-scale model change to prevent people from actually going into hospital, maintaining them in the community, and early intervention, and a whole load of health promotion around people taking over a wee bit control for themselves and going forward. There is an anxiety around the gap that still remains between the 2.2 having identified savings and the 3.9 million that has been asked for. And I know that they're continuing to look at options and going forward, and I would encourage that to happen. However, the caveat being that members may start to see things that are quite unpalatable coming forward at that point, but that will be for us to make decisions upon, and obviously the implication of not being able to accept some of those unpalatable decisions means that the impact will fall to other council services, which is a dilemma I know that members will find very difficult to cope with. But we do have a service that has pressure points. We have demographic pressures. We're all getting older. We're all living better older, and as a result, all the age-related issues are coming later in life to us all, although some I'm not sure about that. But we can have an influence on that and keeping people well and fit and able and less dependent on services. But we have a very much a demand-led service, and as a result that will be variable, and that's how challenging it is in planning for the services going forward. And finishing, and before I hand over to my portfolio holder, who will say a bit more in depth, just to highlight that there is a need for an intermediate care facility. There is provision there, and there has been for some time. We know we need to get on with that and get that done. And just to highlight to members that the discussion we would have had previously, had we been able to look at that in depth, that additional 1.5% within the council tax, I'm sure that if we were going to be providing better facilities for people with health conditions that needed that support, we would have been able to convince them that out of that 1 million council tax to top up that in order to help with intermediate care facility, that would be a really positive investment, and that's the type of things that I would like to have seen us being able to look at. Instead, then that is going to add an additional pressure within our capital programme going forward, because 3.7 million is not going to build us an intermediate care facility, even if we do have a lease or a ground sharing agreement with the NHS Forth Valley around that. So that would just a little example of where we could have been having a wee bit more forward planning. I think that there needs to be further discussions with around the savings, and I think council as a whole need to think about what their ask of the IJB is going to be in the longer term, whether or not we would be happy to consider drawing back on that top level, or and put the burden on to other services, or whether we continue to ask them to pursue some other savings within the system. And we also aren't clear as yet to what caveats may be brought down from government, as there was last year with a limited percentage of what we could take from the IJB by way of savings. But we also did give additional funding last year, I think of around £1 million into the IJB, recognising it is a needs-led service. And where we do that, it has to be around that transformational change. And that's maybe something that members would wish to consider going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. You'll be glad to hear I'm not going to go that in depth. No, but for once I'm not going to be that long. There's just a couple of things that I wanted to touch on from the service delivery plan. You'll see that there's a range of work streams identified, and these are part of a whole systems approach. I'd like to highlight a couple before moving on to the financial aspects. First of all, there's a pilot of Home First ongoing, and I'd like to recognise the work of our heads of integration. Teams have been working directly in the hospitals to identify people ready for discharge and what needs to be in place for them to get home quickly. This has been very successful and has had an impact on delays in discharge. And there has been times where the teams have significantly supported our colleagues in health when the acute hospital has been over 100% capacity, and that's part of the demand at the front door. As Patricia said, the localities are just about ready to go. I think I've mentioned them more than once, but very recently the team were interviewing for the final locality manager, which is East Locality Manager, and as I understand it has been offered the post subject to references and checks. So we'll be ready to move with that in early 2020. some of you will have attended the Living Well Hub at Falkirk Sensory Centre. You'll have attended the launch on that, and that's first the first of those hubs, where people can access assessment, they can access equipment and ideas to improve their strength, fitness and well-being. And I think we can't underestimate how important it is to intervene early, where people are starting to find weaknesses, are starting to be at risk it falls. That is not a done deal. It doesn't mean it's a downward trajectory. We can help people improve and build their strength back up, and so those hubs are going to be critical to supporting that work. All of the work in terms of the delivery plan is focusing on key things: recovery, reablement, and supporting people to stay at home for as long as possible. But part of that will have an impact on the budget. At the moment, we aren't in the position where services are transformed. But if we can transform services across the piece, then we can reduce demand, support people as early as possible, and prevent unnecessary, what was a problem with that word, unnecessary admissions. So, you know, there's a chance to actually bring savings about by changing the system that we deliver to people. I suppose at the moment we have a paper, the medium-term financial plan and delivery plan are going to be presented to the IJB on Friday, and I would encourage anyone, the papers are available, and I would encourage all members to have a look at both those plans and have a look at how things are intended to change in the future, are intended to help deliver that vision. But we have increasing demand at the moment, and you'll have seen there are gaps in both our own proposals and the NHS proposals. But this is there's a 3-year plan of activity in improving assessment and care management, redesign, supporting carers, which you know is very dear to my heart, improving mental health, which is a priority across not just the IJB, but across our council and partners, education across the board. If we can support better mental health, we can reduce demand. We have pressures, and prescribing remains that's a significant one. We had a presentation at I think it was the last IJB around the work that is being done to try and reduce some of those pressures, but they will be things that go up and down, because whilst things come off patent, off licence, and that makes them cheaper, and that's obviously something that we would want to continue to protect. Alongside that, fantastic new drugs come on board that extend people's lives, that improve their quality of lives. So it will always be a balance in relation to prescribing, but we will need to continue to have influence on the areas that we can influence in relation to spend. And so there's still work to be done in relation to identifying savings. A couple of things in the paper. Patricia mentioned charging, and I think to reform our charging policy in relation to social care is a significantly complicated issue. It's not easy, and particularly alongside the council's own charging and concessions policy. We know that personal care is now free to both to people of all ages. My own party has committed in the future Holyrood election that would be that social care would also be free, and that would be that funds would be provided to support that. But it's a question of putting in the amount of work at the moment when we have so many other things to do that actually will make huge differences to people's lives and to our expenditure and demand. And finally, just to say, I'm delighted that we're still able to continue to commit to investment in changing places changes places, toilets. As you know, the Helix is, I think, is it there? Is it? It's ready to come on stream anyway. The work's been ongoing, and the next one's going to open in early 2020 in Bowness Recreation Centre. And I think that this is part of that bigger picture about enabling people to live independent lives, enabling them to be part of their communities. And if we don't have accessible facilities in our communities, then we don't offer those opportunities. So I'll finish it up with that, because I'm sure you've got lots of questions of Patricia and Amanda.
Okay. Thank you very much, Provost. I'll say Sat, if you don't mind. I want to make a few points, actually. Just as a bit of background, years I worked in the pharmaceutical industry. I covered every health board in Scotland, called in all the hospitals, on many, many GPs. I dealt with health service procurement departments, even the one in the Gyle, the one that I call, in many, many instances. So I understand the pharmaceutical stroke prescribing industry very, very well. And one of the issues currently, as I see it, is quite simple. And it's not a political point, it's a fact, actually, that prices have been driven up of pharmaceuticals by the indecision of Brexit. Because, first of all, the NHS, as you know, are stocking up with many, many months, 3 months at a time, of product, not only pharmaceuticals, but other consumables. Now, that drives up the prices, which affects your budgets. The other issue is quite simple, is that people currently will be stockpiling at home because they're worried that they're not going to get their drugs when Brexit was going to happen the 31st of October. Now, I'm making an assumption here that once Brexit is done, a lot of these prices will start to level out a bit. The other thing as well, which ties in with that, which coincidentally, today is an anniversary for me, not a pleasant one, because 12 months ago today, I was taken into hospital in Forth Valley, then transferred to the Royal Edinburgh Infirmary and spent 20 days there. And during that time, I got treatment, excellent treatment, no criticism whatsoever. 2 days before Christmas, they made a decision whether I should go home or not. Now, every patient that's in hospital will want to go home. So they won't make a decision to say, oh, leave me here. I'm not well enough to go home. I wasn't. I couldn't walk 3 foot when I got to my daughter's house, who her and her husband looked after me for 2 weeks. So there's 2 issues here. First of all, the prices of drugs will level out. You need to look at the supply route. But quite often, drugs are switched on price. And I used to promote one, and it was switched to another drug purely because it was cheaper. It wasn't a bad drug, but it wasn't the best drug in the market, so that's a danger. The other issue is one that you'll be quite well aware of, is that when it happened to me, when you get your drugs changed to a different dose or a different drug, now what I did a month or 2 back is I took the drugs unopened back to the pharmacy, and as you know, they put them in the yellow or orange container and pay to have them destroyed. Now, recently there was a comment, I don't know from whom, it might have been in Scotland or nationally, saying that this is crazy. We're throwing away expensive drugs, some of them cost many, many hundreds of pounds, in the bin when they're unopened and they're sealed. So I think somebody should in Scotland, if they're not already doing that, look at that. Because this will clearly have a major impact on your budgets, because pharmacists are throwing out bucket loads of this stuff every single month, and they're paying to have it destroyed as well. So I think that's one issue that needs to be addressed, and that will help, albeit that the prescribing budget as part of your total budget is a relatively small part, but never mind, it's an important part. Patients in hospital, as I already said, want to get home. Now, the danger is that in the desperation of following a theme, let's get everybody home and set up the care or not. I wasn't offered care, but just said anybody at home that can look after you, well, that's it, fine, tick the box. But quite often patients will be sent home only to go back to the GP very ill very soon. So if you could tell me how many re-referments that have been in our area in the last 12 months, I would really appreciate that, because that is a huge cost, because you have to go through the GP, there's a cost there, you have to go and see the consultant again, there's a cost there, the hospital bed has to be made available, the cost, as you know, of staff in hospital is huge, so I think that might be worth a bit of looking into. And I would appreciate if you could get that number for me, please. Thank you.
Thank you for your helpful comments about the pharmacy budget. In relation to readmissions, the Home First initiative that Councillor Colley referred to is based on a sort of recovery and recuperation model. So we would be supporting people quite intensively when they go home to help them recuperate and then step down their care if that was appropriate and hand them over to the locality home care teams. In relation to readmission rate, that's one area where we've had progress, and I'll send you the data. I don't have it at my fingertips, but I can send you that data. But, you know, the evidence does tell us that people in the last few years of their lives, we can expect them to be readmitted 3 or 4 times in that time. So we're doing what we can to address that, and it's something that will flag if someone's readmitted within a very short period of time to hospital, then that is flagged up. So we do keep an eye on that data, and we'll continue to do that.
Well, I suppose I was just going to make a few points on the prescribing budget. I think it's interesting to note that our prescribing budget is roughly the same as our care at home budget. So the total we spend on home care, both internally and externally. So, you know, it's a significant sum of money. And I think it is important to note that, as you say, there's a lot of sort of external factors and a lot of national factors which we can't influence. However, I think our prescribing colleagues at NHS Forth Valley are identifying some opportunities where they think they can start to influence some of the spend. And that's areas, for example, I'm going to struggle to say the word formulary. Each health board has one, which I understand the other GPs and prescribing colleagues will work with. The NHS Forth Valley one's quite out of date and needs a bit of work. Not out of date, but hasn't had a whole-scale review for some time. So that's a planned piece of work. There's also significant variance between different GP surgeries, and it's trying to understand the reasons behind that and trying to see what inroads can be made to that. And also, as part of the primary care improvement plan, there's been a significant investment in pharmacotherapy staff who are working with the GPs to sort of help with prescribing practices and things. So I think that should be an area that can yield something for the partnership, and those plans are being worked on just now. But whether it will be enough to look at the full overspend within the health budget and the prescribing budget particularly, I'm not sure.
Sorry, the only comment I'd make, the formula issue, you well know that Lothian joint formula used to be standard in many areas, including in England, would follow that formula, so I fully understand that. But that's an issue that's been going on for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you know, it's not something that just sprung up this year, so I understand that, you know. But I think we need to get some conformity and all that, rather than this, why should we be any different from Glasgow or Edinburgh or Tayside or whatever? It's silly. If somebody's discovered the right way to reduce the cost of the drugs, but still maintain the correct prescriptions and the correct drugs. And a good example is when I came, I won't mention the drug, but when I left Edinburgh to go home, they said, we're taking you off this drug. I got to Forth Valley, my first follow-up was 6 weeks later, right? I then asked somebody, why did they take me off that drug? Because I knew about drugs. They said, oh, because Edinburgh wanted to save money. It was then left to a consultant 6 weeks later to say, well, ask the GP, your GP, whether they think you should go back on it. And then 2 months ago, I was asked, did your GP put you back on it? No, I hadn't even discussed that, you see. Now, that's the danger of financial pressures coming down. Decisions are made on pound notes and not what's best for the patient. Now, I'm okay, touch wood, I'm 80% of the way there. I'm happy with the treatment. But what about the patients that aren't 80% of the way there? They're the ones that have been readmitted. So your costs go up. So I understand it's a difficult balancing act. I don't think it's easy for a minute, but I would stress these points. Thanks. Thank you, Prof.
Thanks, Provost. I mean, we all know that budgets are stretched and that we're looking at, as a council, at many unpalatable proposals. And through necessity, Mr Smale and councils having to ask the IGB to make savings of £3 million this coming year. However, in the following report, in the report we're discussing just now, we can see that the IGB has been able to come up with 2.2 million of proposals. I don't think realistically that the IGB can come up with any more savings. Mr McElhone, when he was here, had a look at services. He came in with a fresh eye. He made lots of improvements, and those also did deliver savings. And we have to bear in mind that over the last few years, our adult social work services budget has come in budget each year, which is a miracle compared with how it was before. In a time of growing demand and increasing pressures from a growing population, older population, and for more people living at home with very complex needs. And at the same time, we've made significant savings. Health is struggling as well to deliver its targets, and the pressure on beds is extreme in the acute sector, alongside prescribing costs that are very difficult, if not impossible, to bring into budget for many of the reasons that Ms Councillor Flynn's just described. There aren't any easy answers to any of this, but we have to recognise that asking the IGB to deliver all of those savings is asking them to go away and look at some pretty unpalatable things which none of us want, and I'm sure that we can all imagine what some of those things might be. So it's up to Council to agree to protect that service and to accept that 2 million worth of savings would be difficult, but hopefully achievable, whereas 3 million is not. The IGB needs time to establish the localities, etc. An extra 800,000 of savings to be made is putting too much of a burden on a small team that already has an awful big task to do. Thank you, Provost.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Provost. I agree with you, Provost. This is been an excellent and bad report. It's one of the best presentations I've seen, but there's good news and bad news. Bad news, obviously, is looking at, well, once again, looking at cuts to a much needed and loved service. Councillor Mika John said earlier on that the government was giving the council the last 10 years all the money we needed there. And then we hear from, obviously, the Scottish Government that they're bombing all this extra money into the health board. So I just wonder, is somebody stealing it or something? Because all we've talked about all day is 20 million revenue, 100 million capital, and here again, folks' health, and looking at cutting it again. So there's something happening. I mean, am I daft or something? I mean, there's where's it going? Right. So I would like that kind of looked at. If somebody could tell me where the stockpile is, pound notes. But the other issue is what they said in the report, the positives of the report, and there are a lot of positives in that report. I look at my own community and benefited just twice myself in the last week. The fact we're training up nurses, that they've been nurses for 20 years, today is slightly more difficult work. So you're getting antibiotics for the nurse if you've got chest infections, because they're sounding you, they're getting your blood pressure, and they're looking at you, and it takes the pressure off the doctor. So that's it. We've got mental health nurses coming once a week out to the communities, so folks getting treated near there's no this thing about having to go somewhere else. You're getting treated. Nobody kens what you're going into your local clinic, who to see. So honestly, I'm getting seen there today. You talk about community hospital. I've got an appointment there next week day just for another test and their test. So I'm everywhere, like, you know what I mean. So doing their great work, and you said about the continued work about trying to keep folk at home. Well, that's the most important thing to me, because that partner of mine, she's been trying to get me off that big chair, and I'll tell you, my blanket on, and she'll have me in a care home any time if it's up to her, you know what I mean. So I'm delighted that we're trying to look after folk like me and keep us at house. You know what I mean? But as I say, there's a lot of positives, there's a lot of improvements, but it's worrying when we've got to the extent that we're looking at essential services where people are, living longer and more mental health issues in these other houses. It's costly. Also, what my colleague in the front said there about medicines, I throw a lot out there, and it seems a waste, and there are different reasons for it. If you're on repeat prescription, I've been on heavy painkillers for like 8 or 9 years, like 30 milligram Coconamol, and then because I didn't get them for 2 repeats here because I was on these other painkillers and other issues, they take you off the repeat. Then you've got to go back to the doctor to get back on something you've been on for a need for 8 or 9 years. Oh, you need that, and sitting there. So you're taking up stupid time. And then I'm on 3 inhalers. So I can't mind what they are, but they're 3 different colours anyway. But once again, one's not in the market now. So it's not in the repeat prescription this week because it's no longer there because it's too dear or whatever. But the nurse told me she was changing it to something else. But because it's not changed, I'll need to find out that's an inhaler I'm missing. And then other medication you're on, it's a different box. Or every 6 months it changes the box. It's a different manufacturer, somebody cheaper, or different thing for my blood pressure tablets and different things. In fact, I get that many tablets. It's cut down the amount I need to eat on the weekend. I mean, that's one way. That's one way of saving money. But no, I appreciate the great work you do. But as I say, it's making fantastic improvements. These are a great officers. And as I say, it's worrying when we're looking at this.
Thank you, Councillor McCluckie. You seem to be a walking miracle, and we're all happy for that. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Provost. And it is the season of goodwill, so I'd like to thank Amanda and Patricia and Cecil and Fiona and Alison for giving us their input, but I'd most likely thank Councillor Flynn, who obviously has a fair amount of knowledge in this subject, and I'd also like to thank him for highlighting the real dangers of Brexit. And I'm sure when Lynn is out champing the doors, she'll be letting people know about the dangers of Brexit. But yes, it's been a good report to read, and we've learnt a fair bit from the officers and indeed my colleagues that know a great deal on this subject. So I thank them for that, Provost.
Thank you, Provost. Like the other speakers, I'd like to thank Amanda and Patricia for the report. I've just 2 or 3 questions. The chart on page 108, the operational performance, where Falkirk's 7th. Are we saying that our systems are compatible? That's why we're at 7. If they're not compatible, how can we get them compatible, and when can we get them compatible?
I'll just highlight to you that chart's for 2018-19. It was the most recent national one that we had. We're doing a whole range of work. The Home First approach that we're testing in the hospital just now, where we've actually got staff in the wards talking to the nurses and saying they can take patients home, because often in the hospital the nurses and doctors are very risk averse about actually letting someone go home, but actually our home carers can say no, we can actually look after them and they can probably improve at home quicker. So that's having a significant impact and we're in the process of evaluating that over the next few weeks, and we will then roll that out if it's proved to be wholly successful. Over the last 11-12 months, Forth Valley Royal has been under sustained pressure, early months of the year, right through the summer, and the last few weeks it's been running at 120% occupancy levels. In that time, we've managed to hold our performance and actually improve it recently. And that's been because of the things that we've already got in place, but it's hidden because the rise in demand. There was a 6.7% increase in people turning up at ED in Forth Valley over the last 3 or 4 months, but we've not seen a resultant deterioration in our performance. So we need to absolutely crack, but it's not just about home care, it's actually about what happens in the hospital as well, and that people are maybe being admitted who actually we could support at home. They maybe don't need to be in the hospital in the first place. So we need to tackle every point of the patient journey to make sure that we're supporting people and getting them out quickly. If an older person is in hospital for 7 days, they lose 40% of their capacity. That means that they lose a bit of their balance, they lose their muscle tone, they maybe come in walking and go home not able to walk or very nervous on their feet. So it's really important that we get them home as soon as they're clinically ready to go home so that they can begin to recuperate and recover their capacity that they had when they went in. So it's really important that we get this right.
Okay. That leads me on to my next question. regarding adaptable homes and care packages. Has there been an improvement on that for last year, or is there areas where we need to improve? And if we have to improve, what stop us from improving?
I'm not sure if Amanda knows about the adaptations. I think we've certainly increased the number of adaptations that have taken place this year.
I don't know any detail that I'd be able to give you right now, but I can find out. But what I can see is that previous years we've had underspends in adaptations and needs and adaptations for both private houses and within the HRA. My understanding is that's not the case in 1920, and that we've improved the processes for getting these kind of works through the system. Now that could in itself cause a different kind of budget pressure, but at the same time it's what we're trying to do in terms of keeping people at home. So I understand there has been improvements, but I don't have figures, but I can get them for you.
The other important element of that is the work that Kenny Gillespie and his team have done around the strategic housing improvement plan around the ship, and actually looking at extending the number of accessible homes and adaptable homes to meet the demand that we know is coming in terms of the ageing population. In terms of packages of care, we've done a whole-scale review of our home care system. So we've changed over the last 18 months. We've worked with staff and with trade union colleagues to completely review the service. And as a result of that, they've all now got smartphones. They can get use of a pool car. We've changed the job roles. We had 2 job roles previously, and we've upgraded everyone on and trained them to be an extended personal carer, because we had tremendous variation. Someone maybe needed an extended personal carer, and we had 6 home helps available, and we'd have to externally source the package on that basis. So we've done quite a lot to improve efficiency. We've changed the shift patterns and rotas as well, and what we're doing at the moment is doing a bit of an evaluation of that. One challenge that we do have in the service is our sickness absence, and we're doing work with HR and with our colleagues to try and tackle that. But what we need to do is get the balance right between having our internal service and being responsive, and having sufficient external available that we can draw on when we need it.
Thank you very much. Another question leading on for Councillor Flynn. I've got family members, and my wife's family members are carers both in and out with this council area. And each one of them says the same thing. When you go to look after somebody for their tablets, they have cupboards and cupboards and cupboards of medicines, which they're never going to use. And whether it's right or wrong about the free prescription, people are not caring how they order or when they order. They get it. That is a problem for us as a council and as a nation. So I agree with Councillor Flynn. We get the medicines too easy without even going into the doctors, and that's a problem. The last question is, in the Falkirk area, has the GPs increased or decreased by numbers?
I would need to give you that information so I can give you accurate information. Other elected members have mentioned the extended staff that we have in some GP practices, and that's been rolled out as part of the primary care improvement plan. So the GP practices now will not just have GPs in them, they will have an advanced physiotherapist, a pharmacist, a community psychiatric nurse, and other additional staff. And people, when they phone the GP practice, will be triaged so that they see the most appropriate person. If they've got back pain, they'll see the physio. If they've got maybe anxiety or depression, they will see the community psychiatric nurse. So it's an extended service that has been rolled out as part of the new GP contract. And so people will have better access to get to the right person, and people who really need to see the GP will see the GP, but others will go direct to the service that they need. So that is improving the access, that while they're not actually GPs, they are advanced practitioners, advanced nurses, etc., who are in the practices doing a lot of the work that the GPs formerly would have done. But I can come back to you with an exact number. There is a problem nationally around recruiting GPs, and it's an issue for us locally as well.
Getting the right person is quite easy. You just need to ask the receptionist, and she dictates whether you get an appointment or no.
Thank you, Provost. Right, thank you, Provost. I just wanted to thank Amanda, Patricia and Fiona for their contributions in relation to this excellent report. Also, I'm indebted to Councillor Flynn for his contribution today, mentioning Brexit. As part of Brexit, topical in the news is patented drugs. Are recently been mentioned in relation to future trade deals. Can I ask you, currently, does patented drugs in relation to the cost of them cause you difficulties, not you personally, before they become generic drugs?
Well, yes. I mean, some patented drugs can be very expensive, and sometimes we are lucky in the sense that something will come off patent, and we may get quite a windfall in the budget that will allow significant savings. That's not the case for 1920, and I don't think there's anything significant coming off patent in the next year or two that I'm aware of at this point in time. But certainly drug prices and drug inflation are an issue. I think we've built in round about 5% inflation into our budget at the moment, and that's a mixture of growth in the amount of drugs prescribed, but also in the cost of drugs. In the acute sector, in the large hospitals, that inflationary uplift's nearer 10%. Because of the sort of more complex drugs that are often prescribed in that setting. So it's certainly a pressure, yes.
Thank you, and thank you, Provost.
Thank you. Just to say, Patricia and Amanda, thank you very much, and Fiona, my group colleague, and obviously everybody for your valuable contribution here today. I'm really pleased to hear we're moving forward in a thoughtful way, and we're adapting as we go along. However, Patricia, you said that the biggest pressure you've got is home care. I know you touched on that there just now, but as you'll appreciate, that's fundamental to obviously all our services. We have to get that right first time, because if we don't, that impacts on doctors, it impacts on hospitals, and it impacts on all the other services we've got. So you mentioned about that was the biggest pressure. I'm wondering, does your service do sort of agile work, and when you see that the resources falling for whatever it's under pressure, do you move resource about and put it in there? Because that is a fundamental service, I think, that in the long run, other resources won't be spent. And when you mentioned it as the biggest pressure, what exactly is that? Is it not enough staff? Is it staff sickness? Is it your partners that you work with, you haven't got very good dialogue? It'd be quite good maybe to drill that down a tiny bit. I know I've not got very much time, but really that's my question. Thank you. Right. But that's it.
Thank you. Yes, we have pressure in our home care system. We brought in a system called CM2000 about 18 months ago, and that all of our home care workers carry a card are now on their smartphone, and every care plan in every home has a device on it, and our staff will swipe in and swipe out. So we know exactly where people are, we know where we've got gaps. If someone is perhaps going to be discharged from hospital on a street and we know there's a carer going to be there at lunchtime, we can arrange for that carer to do that home visit. So yes, we have that. Previously we had an area-wide home care service, one registered service, but what we're actually just completing is establishing 3 locality home care services. And that means that more of our staff can walk their runs, are out and about in the community, and actually will work together with the district nurses and the health visitors and the GPs and work together around the person and around the family. And that way we will have more flexibility and more responsiveness, but still will have the ability to move some resource. One of our big challenges is to provide continuity of care. And that was something in the previous home care inspection over a year ago we were found wanting on, and that can happen if there's sickness absence or if you move people around too much. Because the most important thing to service users and their families is that they know the person coming in and that there is a consistency. So it's constantly a balancing act between meeting all of these demands and ensuring the quality of the service.
And it's constantly reviewed as well as you go along.
Yes, I mean, every morning people will phone and say, I'm taking my mum to the hospital, she doesn't need a carer at lunchtime, but can they come in at tea time? So the teams are constantly reconfiguring the runs and meeting any demand that there is coming out of the hospital.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Provost. I'm happy to commend the work that's been done by the IJB and Amanda and our team on finance for bringing this report to us. However, unlike Councillor Gardner, I don't think it's a good report. I think it's a very sad report. I think it's well written and it's well documented, but what it's actually saying is extremely worrying. I think it's reminding us of the implication that the cuts to public service is having on our residents and mostly the most vulnerable. Before I go into the actual report itself, I was trying to find out the information that I was looking for, but I've got written down in my notes here about, can you just, I'll make it simple, Patricia, have any of our local hospitals been put in special measures at any time?
Forth Valley Royal was on special measures or escalation, as it's called. Special measures is the term used in NHS England. It was on escalation from January of this year through to, I would think, round about October, November.
So, for the biggest part of this year, our main primary healthcare giver was in special measures, or what did you call it?
Escalation. There are 5 points of escalation.
So, struggling basically to do what they're supposed to be doing.
Well, we're in receipt of extra support coming in from outside to help manage the hospital and manage the demand.
Okay, I thought it was somewhere in my head, but I couldn't find it on the Google, and it was struggling to find it in the filing cabinet up here. And I think that, as I said, this report is an extremely good reflection of a bad situation. I was delighted to hear Councillor Colley talking, as it's referred to in 13.4, about the Scottish Government, if they're getting back in, to say that they would take social care and make it free, because if that is the case, then it's great for the people that need that service, and hopefully it will improve care for our constituents. However, on another issue, it's sidelining local government yet again. So, we've heard already a few times that governments have been fully funded, local councils have been fully funded, which I'm trying to marry up a bit like John said earlier. The two don't equate. If we're talking about unpalatable decisions being made, if we're talking about, you know, robbing Peter to pay Paul, or giving you more leeway and taking these services from other council departments, then we're not being fully funded and we're not being transformational. We're talking about the IJB and we're talking about the trust. In 4.3 on this report, I found it very worrying that the NHS are asking the IJB to use their reserves to support the NHS. As I said, as far as I'm concerned, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, and the people who are suffering, and I mean suffering, as you well know, you're in frontline services, are the people out there that we're supposed to be protecting and looking after. I think it's time we stopped dancing around these issues and called it as it was. If local services were properly funded by the Scottish Government, we wouldn't be scraping about the bottom of the barrel and arguing about which of our residents are most in need. Our local hospital, as I say, if that's it, it's in special measures for most of this year. We're not transforming, we're cutting everyday services, and every day it's getting worse. Now, I understand that the administration won't or can't admit what the root cause is, but it's their colleagues, and the colleagues in Westminster, before I get that one thrown at me, I don't mind insulting everybody in the hall at the same time. There are two political parties that are controlling what we do in this council, and their colleagues are making economic decisions here. It's not an economic necessity to cut local authorities. It's a political choice, and I think it's a very bad one.
Thank you very much for your input. It's Councillor Spears to finish off, and then I think Councillor Colley wants back in for 1 minute. Councillor Spears, sir.
I would first of all like to commend you on all the work that's been carried out, and I'm pleased and glad that hopefully united we can move on. The impact is immense on an ageing population, and I say that as somebody who's grown old myself. But my real question is, and it's been touched on lightly, is we'll need a lot more contingency plans. For instance, regarding Brexit, immigration, our hospitals have many overseas workers in them. A lot of people are now choosing to leave the UK because of uncertainty. The increase in costs of patented drugs. I mean, there's a popular advert, thing going around Facebook. You're going to be £2,500 if you call an ambulance, if our NHS is privatised. I think we had the Leader of the Opposition in Westminster with a leaked trade document indicating the NHS may be up for sale. I mean, so have we thought about this, and do we have any sort of contingency? I know it's an immense question, but we certainly live in worrying days indeed.
I don't think we listen to fake news, but carry on then, Patricia.
Thank you. As you would expect, there is planning around the contingency around Brexit. Locally, the health service is reporting absolutely minimal impact in terms of overseas workers that are employed in the system here. So locally, that's not a particular issue, but it is a significant issue in other parts of the health system in Scotland. We work with our colleagues in the council and colleagues in the NHS to do our risk assessments and our contingency planning, so we're very much part of that. And as you would expect, we are actively engaged in that and looking at all eventualities.
Two points of clarification. I am on the issue, and I think it is unbecoming of Councillor Coombs to use the term special measures when she's been told it's not special measures. Far be it for me to defend my colleagues in the NHS, but can I finish? I think there's a particular connotation being made there. NHS Forth Valley is receiving support, and primarily that is because of the demand at the front door, the demand coming through acute, and we know we have, as you know, there is a target for a 4-hour window, and it's to help, partly to help deliver that. So I think I just wanted to say that. On the issue of stockpiling medications, my understanding is that and I actually think this is across Scotland, but certainly in Forth Valley, that individuals are not getting medication for what they used to be able to get, like 3 months worth. It's for a period of a month, so you can get a repeat prescription for that. But some of the issues are coming in relation to medicine reconciliation. And the work that Patricia mentioned in terms of pharmacy in GP's practices. So when somebody's released from hospital, for example, their medication might all change, but sometimes their repeat prescriptions are not catching up with that. So having someone in the practice to make sure that the medication that they're prescribed is the new set of medication that they have, so that they're not getting the wrong things, so that they don't have that situation where there's a cupboard full of medication that they can't use. They've maybe not used for 6 weeks because they've been in hospital before. So it was a point of clarification.
Okay then, thanks for the points of clarification.
Promised I got 2 months supply yesterday.
Okay then, thank you, sir. Okay then, now listen, that's been a very important report. That's how everybody had an opportunity to speak there. Everybody has. We agreed the report that we agreed to what's in the report. Okay, thank you. Now this is the item for the scrutiny. The Scrutiny Plan 2020, it's pages 118 to 121. The report is coming forward by Brian Perry, but as members had a look at this report, are they happy to move it as it stands, or do they want to have a debate on it? Are you happy to accept it? Agreed. Okay, that takes us out to the execution.
May I just make one comment, please? I'm happy to, we do proceed on the recommendation, except to say that I would be disappointed the date of 24th of June, and I would hope that perhaps that we would be able to come forward with a second item an earlier if Council permitted.
That takes us to execution of deeds, pages 122 to 125. We agreed to that? Agreed. And as we know, item 13, they've been moved to the executive. Just to take the opportunity to thank you all once again. Wish you all and your families a very Merry Christmas. We don't see you at any further meetings. Other than that, thank you very much. It's been a very open and pragmatic meeting. Thank you.